Chapter 21. The Ancients Ate Better Than You. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Callous Editor. Walker against partners like Tang Wan, fight. Those who hit their wives were animals. Education. The marshal knew how to educate his subordinates, but educate his partner. He had never done it. Tang Wan was always pulling on his tiger's whiskers and making him so angry that his fur would puff up. The marshal only had one method left. If he couldn't provoke, then he would hide. The marshal, who had always been able to do everything between heaven and earth and would never fail, was defeated by Tang Wan. He angrily went to search for a place to turn back into a human. Tang Wan was still caught up in the excitement of De Zhuang talking. He had always wanted to tease the cub into speaking. He noticed that his baby had snuck away and went to go look for him. But as soon as he reached the door, he was blocked by a tall figure. Tang Wan almost bumped into the other's shoulders, and his face went from a teasing look to a more serious one. "Zhong He, you're back." Zhong He was sullen. N. Tang Wan saw his facial expression and thought that he was tired. He stood aside and let the other in. "If you're tired, you can rest. Have you eaten this evening? I can deliver some food to you." Zhong He sidestepped and blocked Tang Wan's path. They were deadlocked and he refused to let him leave. "Ate already." Tang Wan blinked. It seemed that the marshal was in a bad mood. "What happened? Did someone make you angry?" Zhong He looked at Tang Wan's innocent, ignorant face with a gloomy eye. N. Tang Wan became serious. He carried forward the spirit of cooperation between husband and wife and patted Zhong He's shoulder. He put all his strength into urging the other and giving him strength. "You are the empire's marshal. In front of outsiders, you have to have a firm will, a steel spirit. At home, you don't have to cover it up. If you're mad, you must speak up, don't hold back." Zhong He. Tang Wan was sympathetic towards Zhong He. Outsiders had portrayed him as an invincible legend. In their eyes, Zhong He was a stiff, unyielding hero. Zhong He would be the most tired person. Okay. Tang Wan stroked Zhong He's head like he was a big cat, raising his hand and ruffling the black hair. "Don't be angry, I'll tell you something good. De Zhuang can talk, his IQ is okay." The corner of Zhong He's mouth twitched. He grabbed Tang Wan's hand and pulled him directly into his arms. He didn't want Tang Wan to see his puffing expression of anger. Tang Wan's body tensed, then his lips curved slightly upwards and he patted Zhong He's back. "You're very happy and excited too. If you're happy, you also need to express it, don't hold back." Zhong He pressed Tang Wan against the door and rested his forehead against the other's. He grit his teeth, wanting to bite angrily at the other. Tang Wan had a knowing expression on his face. He understood that the other couldn't easily express his emotions. Still trying to appease him, Tang Wan tentatively raised his hands and finally gathered enough courage to put his arms around Zhong He's waist. He tried to look calm. "I don't know why the child is so upset," and he ran away. Zhong He looked down at Tang Wan's red ears. His gaze fell onto his lips and his eyes grew darker and darker. When Tang Wan opened his mouth to say something again, Zhong He took a deep breath and didn't want to endure it anymore. He lowered his head and blocked the chattering mouth. After accumulating a day's worth of anger, he finally found a way to release it and his unhappy mood was instantly cured. The self-taught marshal finally found a way to deal with his discontent and he didn't give Tang Wan a chance to refuse. When Tang Wan finally didn't want to speak anymore and furiously glared at him, Zhong He raised his head and held his hands so that he couldn't run away. "I heard from Lin Bo that you wanted my communication number." Tang Wan turned his head and laughed coldly. "Haha, I don't want it anymore." Zhong He's mouth curved up, in a pleasant mood, and looked at Tang Wan's moist and glistening lips. "I'll give it to you." I don't want it." "Don't give it to me." Tang Wan irately pushed against the person who had caged him in his arms. But the door was behind him and there was nowhere for him to hide. There were so many people in the mansion, what if they were seen? Why couldn't he pay a little more attention to his image? Do you want it? Zong He narrowed his eyes and wanted to lower his head again. Tang Wan stiffened and there was a fluttering in the bottom of his stomach. I want it, I want it, I want it, Bedodem Zong He laughed, so anxious. Tang Wan flushed and wanted to angrily curse, please have some face. Is your heart black? Lin Bo came down the stairs and gave them a quiet reminder. If there's something going on between you two, you can go into your room and shut the door. N. Zong He hugged Tang Wan's waist, turned around, and closed the door. Tang Wan covered his face. What N? This was a huge misunderstanding. Finally, Tang Wan got Zong He's communications number. When he was in the process of adding him as a friend, Tang Wan felt that it wasn't easy. He wasn't proud at all of having gotten the personal communications number of the Empire's Marshal. After being pressed against the door by Zong He again and lightly rubbed, Tang Wan finally freed himself. He circled around the mansion but still couldn't find De Zhuang, so he simply let Jin Xiaopeng out and held it in his arms for a long time. Only then did his injured mood ease. A cat that knew how to act spoiled was a good cat. Just as Tang Wan was combing through Jin Xiaopeng's fur, a large cat more than 2 meters in length came up quietly behind him and lightly blew on his neck. Hey! Tang Wan hunched over and turned his head. His eyes glowed and he wrapped his arms around the cat's neck. This little demon, playing around like a hooligan to please him in this way. But he couldn't control his own hands at all, too annoying. Zong He took Tang Wan's sleeve and dragged him back into the bedroom. At night, Tang Wan fruitlessly struggled against the big cat's embrace. He cursed Zong He, this scheming cat, wrapped his arms around him, and slept soundly. Early in the morning, Tang Wan lay on the bed and scrolled through his Weibo. He didn't know how so many people were idle. They posted and discussed what he looked like. Many people wanted to see his face, speculating that he was very ugly. Maybe his eyes were small, had a collapsed nose, and was bald with a pockmarked face. Otherwise, why else would he never show them his face? If he was good-looking, why wouldn't he show it? Tang Wan laughed scornfully, they're the ones who are ugly. They were each uglier than the one before. But he couldn't gamble with his face. He still didn't know how the original had died, or whether he had enemies or not. The less trouble that was stirred up, the better off he would be. There were many messages on the internet hoping for his cooperation, usually in business, and many people who wanted to invite him to work for their companies in things like research. Afraid that Tang Wan wouldn't see, they looked for people to support the messages and put it towards the top. After silently reading them, Tang Wan still pretended to be blind. He turned around and sent a message on his Weibo. Should I do a live broadcast today? Comments quickly brushed by. Want. Yes. Seeking broadcast. Hurry up, BA seeking broadcast +1 seeking broadcast plus ID card code. They were like a group of starving goblins all opening their mouths to be fed. Tang Wan thought over it, what should he broadcast? He should buy a few more cats. If he had a second, he would have a third. Now, De Zhuang had completely accepted Jin Xiaopeng. If Jin Xiaopeng was too lazy to acknowledge Tang Wan, then couldn't he just carry Hua Xiaopeng, Zhu Xiaopeng, Gao Xiaopeng, and Ai Xiaopeng? When Zong He came back to change clothes after bathing, he found Tang Wan lying on the bed, pointing his finger at empty space. Tang Wan was playing with something he couldn't see. Before, he had noticed that Tang Wan wasn't guarded against De Zhuang, and his partner still hid a little secret. Tang Wan hadn't known that Zong He came back until he heard the sound of an opening wardrobe. Then he shrank into the bedding and hid himself. Zong He sometimes walked silently like a cat, especially when he wasn't wearing his military boots. A single stride of his long legs would cover more than a meter, and he quickly arrived behind him. There was no sound at all. Tang Wan gritted his teeth, his legs were shamefully long. In Zhong He's opinion, there was no difference between Tang Wan and the hamster he raised, which liked to conceal food. After changing clothes, Zhong He saw that Tang Wan still hadn't come out. He tucked the quilt in for him and let him fight to get out. Tang Wan struggled to escape from the quilt and indignantly glared at Zhong He. Zhong He raised his eyebrows and said earnestly, "I was afraid that you were cold." Tang Wan waved him a contemptuous look, who would believe it? At this time, someone on Weibo said. "The little raccoon hasn't appeared in a long time, I'm thinking of it." Right, Shi Shua Shua hasn't come out in a long time. Let it come. Shi Shua Shua. Shi Shua Shua. Shi Shua Shua. I just discovered that Shi Shua Shua was a raccoon today. When Tang Wan saw this, his eyes brightened. Eating, sleeping, and scolding De Zhuang. As a pet blogger, he decided to let Shi Shua Shua out. "Let's cook together, the food I make tastes especially good. Do you guys want to taste it?" Instead, the comments were mournful. "Don't want. Every time, I greedily salivate, please be kind. Really don't want. You'll make me want to eat nothing today. After seeing you cook, what I eat is garbage. Don't look, don't look, don't look. Just let Shi Shua Shua out, don't make any food." Eating, sleeping, and scolding De Zhuang. Well, responding to most fans' strong demand, let's start live cooking at 10:30 a.m. today. I'll take Shi Shua Shua out to help me wash the vegetables. Please come. Then the fans were so angry their hair fried. "You villain. It must be because you're so ugly that your heart would be so distorted. But I can't help but want to watch it, I'm already ravenous. Tang Tang, don't you love me anymore? Are you torturing my taste buds again?" Tang Wan smiled mockingly, those ignorant people. They were used to nutrient solution and had never seen a delicious meal, so their tongues had degenerated. He was trying to get their taste buds back to normal, letting them know that Chinese cuisine was extensive and profound. He could guarantee it using his 20.5 years of experience feeding himself. Zhong He took out 2 outfits and tossed them in front of Tang Wan. "I'm going to the army today and I'll be back for lunch." Tang Wan turned over and sat up, his head like a bird's nest. "Then I'll cook something for you. Do you have anything you want to eat?" Zhong He didn't even need to think. Meat. As long as it was meat, he would like it. Tang Wan shrugged. "Okay, I'll spare no effort in getting you to 300 kilograms. Zhong He asked curiously, "If I become that fat, aren't you afraid that I'll crush you?" Tang Wan sent a pillow flying over. How could this rogue say something like that so seriously? Zhong He cocked his head and smacked the pillow back. He couldn't help but say, "You're too willful, I'm used to it." He was still especially proud. Tang Wan sighed, what could he say? Just saying that he was excited would be good enough. At noon, Tang Wan decided to cook a few more dishes. Every day, there would be someone from the kitchens who would go and buy meat because Zhong He liked to eat meat. Every day, he would buy all kinds of meat. Tang Wan went to pick and choose, deciding to make sliced soy sauce beef and specialty marinated ribs. There was also another specialty that he liked. Dong by Dragon Pearls. There were also some lamb ribs that he noticed Zhong He especially favored and cumin lamb chops. Of course, vegetables were essential. The meat was for Zhong He, and the vegetables were for him. There was also fragrant rice. With the chef's help, Tang Wan selected the ingredients and filled up a small cart. It was quickly 10:30 a.m. and Tang Wan punctually began his live broadcast, arranging the food in a row. The audience first exclaimed, "Your kitchen is so big." Then they were drawn to the food and cried, "It's over, today our taste buds will be destroyed." Tang Wan smiled and said, I know you all want to see me cook, so I want to satisfy you. The audience was upset, but they still tossed him gifts. All right, you have the final say. Who let you be so talented? At this time, the Imperial Department of Gene Security sent hundreds of emails to all parts of the empire. Star Network Broadcasting Studio ID eating, sleeping, and scolding de Zhuang is suspected of altering species genes and enslaving cubs. May the relevant departments please conduct a thorough investigation. Hundreds of complaints came in at once, alerting the Imperial Department of Gene Security. In this moment, the director of the department said appeasingly into the communicator, "Rest assured, with such a large battle, he can't go on." The Food, Omega. Chapter 22. Live Studio, blocked. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Callous Editor. Walker Tang Wan put the camera aside. Preparing to cook, he wore protective sleeves and released the raccoon. "Shi Shua Shua, can you help Daddy wash vegetables?" For Shi Shua Shua, there wasn't anything that couldn't be solved by washing it in water. If there was, then it would only have to be washed another 2 times. As a raccoon who liked water more than his peers, Shi Shua Shua had developed an all-encompassing skill. Not to mention dishes, even socks could be washed clean. The little fellow was fat and strong, and the most powerful thing was that a chubby body could also be very dexterous. It picked up the basin and cheerfully went to go fetch water. Shi Shua Shua's fur ranged from gray-brown to nearly black, with black around the eyes and very symmetrical left and right fur colors. 2 furry ears perked up and looked a little bit like a big gray-furred fox. Especially on the fluffy tail, there were many rings of black and white fur. While it was working, its tail shook a few times, like a child who was working hard. It was very lovely. Tang Wan was very happy to see it. He stuffed an apple into its mouth and encouraged it, "You're doing very well." Shi Shua Shua was happy and both of its paws were very busy and splashed water all over itself. The audience was all amused and shouted at Tang Wan to open the touch function. They wanted to touch a wet raccoon. Unfortunately, Tang Wan was cooking and didn't see their demands. The meat dishes needed to be stewed slowly and carefully. Tang Wan, a genuine person from Earth, preferred traditional methods. He wasn't familiar with high-tech cooking equipment, and the meat stewed slowly over a gentle fire tasted different from that cooked by high-tech equipment. Tang Wan could eat a bit of sliced soy sauce beef. He liked it soft, so he had to stew it for more than an hour and a half. Braised bones were Zhong He's favorite. Tang Wan figured that the other probably ground his teeth in his sleep. Every time he ate meat, it was chewy, so it only needed to be stewed for an hour. Tang Wan wouldn't eat mutton. He didn't like the smell of it, but he made it according to Zhong He's preferences. Now, cattle and sheep weren't the cute little things that they had eaten back on Earth. They had become incomparably enormous and it took a lot of effort to catch them. Tang Wan first stewed the beef, then dealt with the bones and mutton. By this time, the raccoon had almost finished washing the vegetables. Tang Wan watched the little fellow work hard and fed him some dried jerky. The little raccoon was an omnivore and ate everything, making it easy to raise. Unfortunately, its temperament was often too naughty and frequently jumped up and down, so not many people raised them at home. Shi Shua Shua took the jerky out of its mouth, rinsed it with water, and stuffed it back into its mouth. The whole thing was done smoothly, and the audience laughed and tossed gifts. This action was so delightful. While Tang Wan was ready to make the marinated ribs, he chatted with everyone. This is a famous dish familiar to many of Earth's Chinese people. There is an interesting story about this dish's origins. Legend has it that there was a famous monk named Jigong in the southern Song dynasty. He went to a butcher's door and asked for money. The boss said that he had just opened the shop so there wasn't any money to give, but he could give him a piece of meat. After the monk finished eating, he asked the boss for another piece and he gave it to him. After the monk finished eating that, he asked for yet another piece. The boss was unhappy and asked him what he could sell after he finished eating. The monk replied that if there was no meat, then he could just sell the bones. He pulled out several cattails from the cattail fan he carried with him and gave it to the boss. He told the boss to put the cattail stems in with the pot of meat and stew it together. He said that it would certainly become world-famous. Tang Wan smiled and asked, if it were you, would you have listened to the monk? All of the audience said that they wouldn't, who would listen to a passerby's casual words. Tang Wan nodded, yes, I wouldn't have believed it either, but the boss did. He really threw those cattails into the pot. Unexpectedly, the meat was so fragrant that the whole city of Wuxi could smell it. From then on, the butcher began to specialize in the marinated ribs, and later it became a famous local specialty, the Wuxi marinated ribs. The audience had nothing to say, was this also okay? Tang Wan laughed and told them, this is just a legend and the truth remains a mystery. When everyone heard this, they were quite confused and stupefied. They thought of it as a story. After all, Earth had long since become a deserted planet and wasn't suitable for humans to live on. How many civilizations had inhabited it? Only the descendants of those who emigrated from Earth were likely to care even a little. In most people's eyes, after years of change, how many planets would become like Earth? Lost in the corners of the galaxy, Earth was just one of them. Tang Wan took out the pork ribs, which had been salted 10 minutes ago, then placed them into sizzling oil, and fried them to a golden color. The audience's eyes were attracted to the golden pork ribs and crazily sought the taste function from Tang Wan. Following their demands, Tang Wan opened the taste and touch functions, and many audience members began to howl. Smells good, we want to eat. Although every time this happens I am envious and jealous, I still have to work overtime at noon and can only drink the nutrient solution. I always thought my cooking was delicious until I came across the studio. Our old ancestors ate better than we do. Why should we have to be born 1,000 years after the immigration? Old ancestors, I want to return to Earth. Tang Wan didn't have time to read the comments. He left some oil on the bottom of the pan, placed some ginger slices in, added in scallion, star anise, and ground cinnamon. He poured in the water, placed the ribs in, and reminded them, at this time, we must pour in hot water, because the raw ribs will shrivel if placed in cold water and won't taste good. The comments were all howling. No matter what Tang Wan said, they had already been touched by the fragrance. They only wanted to eat. Tang Wan was helpless, this group of underfed goblins. The little raccoon beside him had washed all of the vegetables, sat on the table, and vigorously gnawed on some turnips. He ate more energetically than Luo Bei. Tang Wan reminded it, eat a little less, I'll give you some delicious food later. Shi Shua Shua liked cat food very much, but every time it ate cat food, it would grab a handful and rinse it with water. Tang Wan couldn't stand its way of eating the cat food, so he seldom gave it to the raccoon. Tang Wan stewed the meat and bones in the pot and began to make the next dish. We're doing a dish that I like very much, dong by dragon pearls. The name sounds good, right? The audience was curious. Are dragon pearls the eyes of dragons? What are dragons? Earthworms. Geckos. This dragon pearl isn't the eye of any animal. It's like the dong by longan we eat, a kind of fruit. This dish also contains literary allusions. The audience went silent and concentrated on the stories. Tang Wan could not only cook and care for cats, but he was also knowledgeable and talented, and knew how to tell many stories. Tang Wan smiled and said, someone told them to me, but I had forgotten who it was. The audience that was all settled down and ready to listen to the story. Our pants are all already off, you told us just that. Tang Wan turned his back and pretended not to see them. The audience was very spirited. Pretended to be blind. Again. At this time, the stout director of the network management for the Imperial Center for Gene Safety asked the staff members who were watching Tang Wan's live broadcast, what have you seen happen? Can you recognize what species of cub that animal is? The staff member was surprised. No, the stout supervisor frowned. What do you see then? The staff member quickly picked up the receiver and explained, we see him cooking, it's too fragrant. The supervisor rapped his knuckles against the table, in a bad mood. Work hard, with so many people complaining, there must be something wrong with it. We firmly oppose this kind of enslaving of cubs. It's a felony to alter genes, we must check carefully. Look at that eating cub. The supervisor pointed at the raccoon and said righteously. If it's really a cub who has taken medicine, he's committing a crime. Even if there is a slight possibility, we must strictly check him. There can't be any delay. The staff member hurried to take the receiver with them and said solemnly, we will definitely observe this host. If there's any problem, we will contact the Star Network and freeze his broadcast. If he still doesn't cooperate, we'll tell the Imperial Army to catch him. Only then did the supervisor smile, that's right. Tang Wan had minced the pork and shrimp into paste and placed it in a bowl. He also mixed in shallots, ginger, mushrooms, salt, MSG, sugar, egg whites, starch, and cooking wine. He let it marinate for a little while. At this time, the audience used the touch function to poke at the meat stuffing and lick their fingers. The taste of raw meat made their hair stand up on end. It tastes too bad. This time, Tang Wan could read the comments but didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Don't be too impatient, it's still raw. The audience's comments rolled in. I've never seen such a complicated way of cooking. When I make dishes, I boil them in water and then fish it out, that kind. Just like those vegetable dishes. Our family is the same, my mother says that it preserves nutrition. Seriously, my mother's cooking isn't good but I don't dare to say it. I was frightened. The chef we hired isn't good at cooking, but what he made was nutritious. Don't say any more, is there a meal worse than our school canteens? Do you dare want fried beans with crisp melon? Oh, my brother upstairs, you've won. Tang Wan laughed and said to everyone, this is a very simple dish. Once, there were several famous dishes on Earth that were difficult. Those were complicated. Take the Mad Monk, for example. Dozens of processes need to be done and it takes several days to complete. Naturally, the taste doesn't have to be mentioned. The audience began to howl again. I hate that I wasn't born on Earth 1,000 years ago. Our old ancestors ate better than we do. Tang Wan put the marinated stuffing into the steamer, steamed it, then removed it. He shelled the longan, opened a small hole in the fruit's flesh, removed the pit, and replaced it with some stuffing, before sealing the opening over it. This became the stuffed longan. He then dipped it into the flour, egg mixture and breadcrumbs. This is the dong by Dragon Pearl. The audience was stunned. How can we bear to eat it? Tang Wan said earnestly. Part with it, I'll eat it myself. The audience asked. What about the meat? Most beastmen were carnivorous and were extremely interested in meat. Tang Wan raised his eyebrow and huffed, I want my partner to gain 300 kilograms. Some of the audience thought that Tang Wan was too ruthless. How heavy was 300 kilograms? Could they still walk? Was he afraid of his partner running away? Others didn't believe it. Did he really have a partner? Really? No kidding. Tang sometimes spoke in a very serious manner, which blurred the lines between the truth and lies. Still, others were envious and jealous. If they could find a partner like Tang Wan, they could have different meals every day and different furry Meng pets. They could die happily. Tang Wan turned the fire on again, heated the oil, and poured the dragon pearls in. When they turned golden, he took them out and drained the oil. Like this, they would be considered done. Now I'll blanch vegetable leaves with boiling water and set the dish. The comments exploded. I can't stand it, what I eat every day are for the sake of those vegetables. The color and luster is so beautiful, with one look you can see that it's crisp and clear. It's too fragrant, I want to take a bite. It's a real pity that I can't eat it. QAQ. After Tang Wan laid out the dishes, the beef, mutton, and marinated ribs were all ready. He placed them all in big bowls. Considering the amount of food his family's large cat ate, Tang Wan made a lot and used a bowl so large it was almost a pot. As soon as the fragrances wafted around, there was only one reaction left in the studio. That was really what they said. With 2 more vegetable dishes, lunch will be done. Tang Wan checked the time. It was almost noon and Zong he should be back soon. He didn't know if they had some kind of tacit understanding, but as soon as the thought arose, he heard footsteps outside of the door. Military boots rang out against the ground, firmly and forcefully. Tang Wan turned around with a smile and looked at the man who had just come through the door. The food is ready. You can go change first, we can eat later. The corners of Zong He's mouth hooked up and he said, okay. Just with that short word, Tang Wan suddenly gained a sense of stability. Once upon a time, he wanted to have a normal home. They could have a mutual understanding and their own ways of communicating. But they must eat at least one meal together every day. He didn't want a large table with one person, cold and lonely. When they rested, they would read together quietly and occasionally take a walk together. He didn't demand too much. He could live a life of satisfaction like this. Tang Wan quickly fried the 2 vegetables and gave the little raccoon a bowl of meat meant for cats to eat he had bought from the system. He told it. Eat it directly, don't wash it. Shi Shua Shua turned it over in its hands and soaked it in water. Tang Wan frowned. This child was already hopeless. Tang Wan had already plated the dishes. He held his tongue and gave the audience a wave. Let them smell and howl again. Tang Wan was satisfied, very good, today's live broadcast ends perfectly. Just when everybody's eyes were gathered in the live broadcasting studio because of Tang Wan's words, the studio's screen suddenly turned black. Tang Wan frowned and looked closer. His face darkened, he was banned. The audience was also confused, what was going on? There had been no sign at all, and suddenly, they were banned. Why? There was no reason. Tang Wan calmly opened his Weibo. Sure enough, he had received a notice 2 seconds ago. From many reports, you are now suspected of the illegal use of drugs, the illegal detention of cubs, mutilation of imperial minors, and other felonies. Please take the initiative to contact the Imperial Department of Gene Security for the genetic testing of all pets within an hour. If the time is exceeded, it will be regarded as evasion of responsibility. You will be arrested in accordance with the law. Imperial Department of Gene Security. Tang Wan read it and smiled angrily. If he really sent them, they might not even come back. Maybe even if he went in himself, they would take him to be a clueless fool. In his previous life, he had been born into a rich and powerful family. From a young age, he had seen his family dance around many issues. He couldn't stand their indifference, and left the family because of his relatives manipulating each other. He lived alone, he could very clearly see these kinds of heartbreaking things. Tang Wan took off his gloves and dropped them onto the table. It was obvious that someone was trying to get him into trouble. So many people had reported him, why hadn't they done so before? If he knew who was behind it, he would definitely buy a snake and stuff it into the bastard's bed in the middle of the night to scare them into infertility. Zong He changed his clothes and arrived at the dining room. When he saw Tang Wan's expression, his face also turned cold. What's wrong? Tang Wan took a deep breath and said calmly, someone shut down my broadcast. They said that my pets were cubs who had taken illegal drugs. The Imperial Department of Gene Security asked me to send my pets over to be examined. Let's have dinner first, this situation certainly won't be over soon. After Zong He sneered, he snorted. Even if we eat, it won't stop them. It's as if we're dead to them. Tang Wan had already calmed down. He even had the impulse to pat Zhong He's head and run his fingers through his hair. Tang Wan had guessed correctly. At that time, the supervisor was currying favor with the second young master of the Marquis family. You can rest assured, I have already contacted the Star Network's cybersecurity department and shut down his broadcast. Let him hand those pets in today. If the cubs really had consumed illegal drugs, then he will be legally responsible. There are so many people reporting and questioning him now. We have to take responsibility and make a thorough investigation. It must be clear to him that the arrangements were proper. Alvin narrowed his eyes. He already knew what to do. Good performance. When there's an opportunity for promotions, I'll mention to my brother. In law that you're a capable manager. Thank you for your trust. The supervisor launched into another round of flattery and comfortably patted the second young master. The young master's sister was the head of Gene Security's new wife. Her younger brother just wanted a few pets, and he could get them with a little finger movement. Was there a difference between flattering him and flattering the head? As this time, Tang Wan's Weibo was a mess. The Imperial Gene Security Department's charges were too heavy. Illegal use of drugs and the forced detention and mutilation of young Empire cubs. It was enough for Tang Wan to be sent to prison. And now that his broadcast had been shut down, which made people think harder about it. There hadn't been any problems at all before this, what had he done wrong? The shutdown came just after Tang Wan's live broadcast, while countless viewers were watching. As soon as it happened, the audience moved to Tang Wan's Weibo. They were all saying, "Is it real? Is it fake? Is this too bad? Could it be that the ones I praised before were cubs that had changed form after taking illegal drugs? Too terrible. My hands tremble at the possibility. If it's true, then I'll throw my money at a domesticated animal." Calm down, no one has said anything yet. It's just cooperating with the investigation. What else is there to say? It's all been shut down. If it was okay, there'd be no need to shut it down. If it's still shut down after the results of the investigation, then there really would be a problem. No wonder he never dared to show his face, it was because he was committing a crime. What evidence do you have to prove that these animals are drugged cubs? You can be held legally responsible for defamation. It's not defamation, it's questioning. What evidence do you have to prove that these animals aren't drugged cubs? Has the Gene Security Department proved his innocence? Some people worried about Tang Wan, some believed it, and some scolded him, saying that he was a scumbag who had concealed his true nature and had finally received his retribution. Still others acted as the incarnations of the guardians of justice, though they still didn't understand what had really happened. They had already decided that Tang Wan was really suspected of those crimes. They must pay attention to the developments and send Tang Wan to the trial bench. Tang Wan had enough to eat and drink. He took the tea that the robotic housekeeper handed to him and rinsed his mouth. He leisurely went online. The Imperial Gene Security Department had issued him an ultimatum and he still had half an hour left to think about it. At that moment, Zhong He's communications device ding-d. The sequence of events were all clarified and all the people involved were detailed in the report. Zhong He glanced and his eyes grew colder. They're too unrestrained. Tang Wan heard this and blinked. He tapped his fingers against the virtual keys. Eating, sleeping, and scolding de Zhuang at Imperial Gene Security Department. Sorry, I have too many pets. You won't finish checking them all, you can have someone come over to my home to check them. Address: Beta Ursi Minori's Special Security Zone, Imperial Army Marshal Zone He's Mansion, Mua Mua, smiley face, sorry for the later chapter. This one was almost double the length of the normal one and I don't like chopping chapters in half. Chapter 23. If you think you're so amazing, come investigate me. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Callous Editor. Walker. Once Tang Wan's Weibo came out, the entire internet was stunned. There was no other explanation, they all thought that Tang Wan had gone crazy and that he was senseless. The comments all said, "If you talked like this when the marshal was still in a coma, maybe nobody would pay attention to you. Now that the marshal is awake, you dare to use his name. Why don't you just write down His Majesty's Palace? Bragging without preparing a draft. Look at him, this man must be discouraged. You're too crazy, you do illegal things and still dare to use the marshal's name. Do you know of the marshal's position in the heart of the empire's people? Tang Tang, quickly retract your Weibo, the marshal's name cannot be used, we really have to discourage you. Go die, moron." Some people were like this. When something was carefully explained to them, they either wouldn't believe it or scold angrily. If something wasn't explained, then they would think that they had won. In both cases, they considered themselves to be the reasonable ones. Tang Wan was not happy. Speak up, what were they swearing at? What about being cultured? How were they any worse than him, an old antique? As a result, Tang Wan replied to the comment of the person who had scolded him. He gave the other a picture of Shenju Gu, cropped to the head and neck, tilted 45 degrees with its mouth pointed upwards. But its eyes looked down, arrogant and disdaining ordinary people. Tang Wan sneered. When high-quality talents wanted to insult someone, they wouldn't use dirty words. The netizens were all confused. What did the picture of Shenju Gu mean? Before, when Tang Wan scolded people, he had also done it in the same veiled way. If they wanted to know how exactly they had been scolded, they would have to research it themselves. This time, Tang Wan was obviously scolding people, but what did he mean? Nobody knew. The netizens were angry. Damn inhumanly terrible person, searching for information was laborious. After Tang Wan left some homework for the netizens, they quieted down and he simply logged out of Weibo and let them clamor for answers. You haven't asked anything, you have this much faith in me. Tang Wan touched his chin and looked at Zhong He. No matter how he looked at it, Zhong He wouldn't be such an impulsive person. Zhong He gave a soft N. The afternoon sunshine was just right, he just wanted to shift back to his original form and bask in the sun. It would be even better if his partner could brush his fur again. Tang Wan reluctantly asked. Why? Zhong He responded languidly. Why should I have so many reasons? I said that I would protect you. With this sentence, Tang Wan gave a warm smile, his eyes curving up. He went around to Zhong He's back and poked his broad shoulders with a finger. Tang Wan smiled and teased, my beloved, do you want your fur brushed? Zhong He frowned and said uncomfortably, it wouldn't be good to do it in broad daylight. Tang Wan continued to poke, my beloved, do you want your fur brushed? Zhong He took a deep breath. Only I can spoil you like this. Tang Wan shrugged, there was nothing he could say. This big cat, who had wanted him to brush his fur, was determined to toss the pot onto his back. Fine, seeing how much he was guarding his face before, he wouldn't argue with him anymore. Big cats needed to be spoiled too. Sticking together and acting lovey-dovey would affect their image. In addition, when the marshal shifted to his beast form, he couldn't resist acting coquettishly towards his partner. Tang Wan pulled Zhong He to their bedroom. The terrace was a large floor-length French window with the ground covered in soft blankets. Tang Wan pulled the translucent curtains apart, sat on the blankets, and brushed the cat's fur, a smile pulling at the corner of his lips. The afternoon sunshine was tranquil and beautiful. Zhong He rested his head on Tang Wan's legs and slowly closed his eyes. Only by his side could he truly feel at peace. Only then could he forget his decade of combat, unload the burden on his shoulders and peacefully enjoy the warm sunshine. How could he not afford to protect him well? The netizens were all busy searching for information, but the people of the Imperial Gene Security Department were all nervous and frightened, shrinking together like a bunch of quails suffering from the winter cold. It was because Zhong He had sent the report directly to the head of Imperial Gene Security Department, Jing Yuanren. Jing Yuanren was furious when he received the report. He rushed back to the department from his home with the report and called back all the people who were on lunch break. Why are you fucking looking for trouble? Why are you such a fool? You didn't bother to find out what hidden motives the other party had, how dare you? Zhu Kuan, you're such a fool. When Jing Yuanren thought of the soldiers in the marshal's mansion who had told him what the marshal had said, his heart chilled. Would they think that they were unrestrained? You carelessly grabbed onto the head of the marshal's wife. What were you going to do once you pulled it down? Did you want to heedlessly arrest the marshal's wife for any crime? Jing Yuanren slammed his fist on the table, but Zhu Kuan was a 180-kilogram fat man that had already been scared to death. He sat in a corner against the wall with a dull gaze and his body twitched. There was only one sentence in his heart. He was finished. Several staff members also followed in his panic, glaring at Zhu Kuan with knife-like gazes, wishing that they could stab him twice. They had a hard time getting in. Was it so easy to pass a test as a civil servant now? They were taken advantage of by this fat man. If they lost their jobs, they'd have nowhere to cry. After Jing Yuanren lost his temper, he finally calmed down. He looked coldly at several staff members and said, "You guys there, are you stupid? You do whatever he wants you to do." The staff members blinked, confused. What did he mean? Everyone is fined 3 months' salary. From this week onwards, you will be required to plant trees on desert stars every rest day. Reflect on your actions. Jing Yuanren looked at Zhu Kuan with a frigid expression and his eyes flashed with disgust. As for you, follow me. In the afternoon, Jing Yuanren personally went over to the marshal's mansion. Of course, he also took Zhu Kuan, who was responsible for the network's complaints and security, along. At the sight of the soldiers standing guard, Zhu Kuan already wanted to kneel down. They were all soldiers who had followed Zhong He to the battlefield, with blood stained on their hands. Their eyes were cold and they stood straight, like a javelin. Egnel.co Jing Yuanren frowned. He just wanted to beat Zhu Kuan to death, he only had himself to blame. Otherwise, he wouldn't have needed to suffer this fate. If the marshal's wife wasn't good-natured, Zhu Kuan wouldn't be able to leave the gates today. Lin Bo came out to greet them with a smile. Department head Jing has come with a welcome, we have been rude. Jing Yuanren smiled bitterly and greeted him. Housekeeper Xianxing is too polite, it was us who have disturbed you. This staff member is rather unfavorable. I brought him here to apologize to the marshal and his wife. All that had happened before were misunderstandings. When they came in, they tried to enter for half an hour before the other party finally paged them in. He was an old man, but he had raised the marshal Zhong He, so he absolutely couldn't be judged by his appearance. Lin Bo listened with an attentive expression and said considerately, then it really needs to be explained. If there's a misunderstanding, then I'm sure it can be resolved. I'll go to see if the marshal and his wife are awake. It's noon, you must sleep a little. How did that come about? Well, if you don't sleep at noon, you'll suffer in the afternoon. Department head Jing smiled. You're right. The marshal had just recovered and needs more rest. Lin Bo smothered a laugh, then went to call the marshal. Jing Yuanren took a deep breath and quietly swallowed his saliva. From the housekeeper's attitude, there was still a lot of business to be done regarding this matter. Looking at the waxy-yellow Zhu Kuan, he was filled with anger. He lowered his voice and warned, what will you say in a moment? Have you thought well about it? Zhu Kuan nodded rapidly. What else could he not understand? Straightforwardly rehearsing until he arrived, how could he dare to play any tricks? Especially when soldiers with guns were stationed all around. Lin Bo had taken half an hour to call and fetch them. By the time Tang Wan came down to the living room, they had already drunk 2 cups of tea. Taking a glance at the situation, Tang Wan almost couldn't hold back his amusement. Lin Bo was too evil. The 2 people looked like they had been here for a long time, but Lin Bo just went to deliver some letters for him. "Hello, it's nice to meet you too. My name is Tang Wan. You're here to check the pet's genes." As soon as Tang Wan had arrived, they stood up. Zhong He had also followed Tang Wan in. When they saw Zhong He, they tensed, especially Zhu Kuan. After drinking 2 cups of tea, they even had the slight urge to use the restroom. After Jing Yuanren politely greeted the 2 of them, he smiled and reassured, "We aren't here to check the pets." Zhong He raised his eyebrows, dissatisfied. "What are you doing here, if not to look at the pets?" Zhu Kuan quickly apologized. "We're here to apologize." Zhong He sat down and asked coldly, "What are you apologizing for? You should act in accordance with the law. If there's a report, then you should check it. It must be clearly investigated today." Zhu Kuan was almost scared into urinating. He was the one who filed the reports. Where would there be a real report? Zhu Kuan really hated Alvin Keppel. If he hadn't wanted a pet, would he have come up with such a method? Tang Wan also agreed with Zhong He. Since someone had reported it, it would be better to check. "I can't afford the charges of detaining young cubs, using illegal drugs, and abusing cubs. My live broadcasting studio is still blocked. If you don't have evidence, the Star Network wouldn't dare to unblock me. You can rest assured that it would be better to check." I would also be reassured. Zhu Kuan was terrified and broke into a sweat, not daring to speak. Jing Yuanren gave him a disgusted glance. Then he smiled. "Okay, then we'll check it out. If there aren't any problems, I will report to you immediately. The authorities will prove you innocent. As for the personnel involved in this matter, I will deal with it according to the law." Zhong He snorted, too lazy to deal with them. Tang Wan laughed. "Thank you, Department Head Jing. It would be wise to do so." As for Zhu Kuan, Tang Wan didn't even look at him, pretending not to know what he had done. This bouffon was doomed a long time ago, the department head having drawn him as cannon fodder. Soon, the personnel in charge of the testing came and Tang Wan took them to the back, towards the garden. First, he released 10 pets, which were recorded and uploaded to Weibo. Eating, sleeping, and scolding de Zhuang. The Imperial Gene Security Department staff has arrived. It's clear whether or not the cubs have been shifted. The comment area quickly became a wave of hundreds of millions of messages. The netizens were divided into 3 groups. The first believed that Tang Wan committed the crimes and whatever he did was to wash himself white. The second firmly supported Tang Wan, saying that they would give evidence to cast the fools off. The third merely observed the development of the situation and tried to face it rationally. After testing the 10, Tang Wan released 10 more. The video was also uploaded to Weibo, broadcasting it live to everyone. When the identity of the marshal's wife would be exposed, no one could say that Zhong He used his identity to suppress others. Many people praised Tang Wan's straightforward operation, and the reasonable ones stood behind him in succession. Since he dared to do it in this manner, they could see that he had a clear conscience. When the results came out, the people who had once accused him of committing a crime would be beaten in the face. Tang Wan didn't read the comments, nor did he reply to any of the news. He recorded all of the staff's sampling, 40 minutes passing like this. The workers used equipment to test them on the spot. There were many pets to be tested and they had only brought one piece of equipment. On the mobile test ship, they arrived one by one, each one taking up 10 minutes. The whole afternoon passed by. The staff gave the report the moment they finished. These pets are definitely not cubs. They have genetic defects, a short lifespan, and no traces of drugs were found in their bodies. The genetic data matched those of Earth's biological database. In the absence of protection, exposure to 3HT radiation might cause mutation or death. It is recommended that they remain at home and not leave the protective ring. Tang Wan recorded it and asked the staff member with a smile in his eyes, "Can I upload this video to the internet?" When the young man saw Tang Wan's beautiful smile, his face turned red and he quickly nodded. "No, don't worry. Feel free to do so." Nearby, Zhong He subconsciously raised his eyebrows and uncomfortably glanced over. After receiving the marshal's cold gaze, the young man ran away, bowing his head. He pretended to be so busy that he couldn't lift his head. Zhu Kuan, who stood by waiting for the results, was pale and trembling. His legs were clenched together, his posture extremely unnatural. Tang Wan thought that he was too scared to hear the results. He smiled at the other with a kind heart and laughed, "Haha." Zhu Kuan's cold sweat came out in full force. He unconsciously tightened his legs even more and stood more oddly. Tang Wan was speechless, but in his heart, he thought that they were still X-shaped legs. Zhu Kuan was about to collapse. As soon as he arrived, he had been nervous. He even drank 2 glasses of water. He had held in the desire to urinate for a long time. However, he had no respite this afternoon. He had always been nervously staring at the staff while they did the testing. He was afraid, his nerves were wound tight like a string and he had no chance to relax. He had a stomach ache and wanted to urinate in his pants. Now that the results had come out and he looked at Tang Wan, he was so frightened that the urge was held back. At that moment, Lin Bo placed a pot of tea on the table. When he put it down, he enthusiastically greeted everyone, "You all must be tired. Have a drink and rest." Zhu Kuan knelt immediately. Lin Bo hurried to him but didn't help him up. He asked, concerned, "Only you aren't gathering forward, are you tired?" The old man happily carried over a glass and placed it into the other's hand, like an enthusiastic elder encouraging shy children. "Child, help yourself and drink some water." Under the old man's seemingly mild and practical attitude, Zhu Kuan could only hold his cup and tearfully drink it down. Lin Bo good-naturedly handed him another filled cup, his eyes filled with pity. "There's still more. Don't worry, just finish drinking it." Zhu Kuan wanted to die. Lin Bo showing his blackened side, asterisk greater than over equal to less than over equal to. Chapter 24. Young Duke Tang. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Callous Editor. Walker Tang Wan uploaded the videos to Weibo and caused a great disturbance on the internet, the netizens having an exciting discussion. Suddenly, Tang Wan's live broadcasting studio was unblocked. Not only that, but the most amazing thing was that the Imperial Gene Security Department issued an official statement, saying that the pets didn't have a problem and thanked the pet blogger for his cooperation. Only then could the netizens respond. Washed white. It was washed white in one afternoon, it really was too fast. Those who had said that Tang Wan was a criminal were repeatedly hit in the face. In an instant, the fans who had always supported Tang Wan stood up, fiercely fighting back. The reasonable people who were in the middle ground also gave their congratulations. Fortunately, it wasn't faked. Otherwise, if it was faked, the scholars who studied paleontology would have cried to death in the bathroom. The netizens weren't foolish. Connecting to what others had said about Tang Wan being reported by many people, many of them understood that there must have been something fishy going on. They suspected that Tang Wan might have been too popular. Who had he offended? But what more people cared about was the testing site really at the Marshal's mansion? What was the relationship between this blogger and the Marshal? There were a lot of people who cared about this matter. Many netizens thought of themselves the incarnations of D. Rengia or Holmes and Conan's students. They tried to uncover some clues, wanting to figure out if Tang Wan was playing a practical joke or if he was really living in the Marshal's mansion. Unfortunately, Tang Wan hardly ever talked about his personal life. There was no gossip, no love affairs, and he didn't depend on his looks either. He only relied on a pair of skillful hands and pets that attracted many fans. In regards to his private life, besides the fact that he was a man, he might have a partner, and that partner might not be in good health, they didn't know anything else. Some people speculated that the blogger might be the marshal's wife, who was also Asian. They produced a picture of his silhouette from the news as evidence. This statement was quickly rejected by the D. Rengis and Holmes and Conan students. Their reasoning was, the marshal was so strong, how could he ever be in a wheelchair? No way, Zhong He's image of invincibility was too strong in the heart of the empire's people. They couldn't handle the image of their god of war in a wheelchair. Besides, when Marshal Zhong He returned to Beta Ursae Minoris, after he stepped off the battleship, many reporters had taken pictures of him, so admitting that the broadcaster was the marshal's wife was basically admitting that Zhong He was weak enough to need a wheelchair. It was pure nonsense. Tang Wan, as usual, pretended to be blind. Other people could say whatever they wanted to say, he was too lazy to explain, nor did he like to explain to strangers who were interfering too much with his private life. There was only one phrase. You can either believe it or not. In the evening, he sent away the Imperial Gene Security Department staff. He looked at Zhu Kuan, who was walking out with X-shaped legs. Tang Wan held his chin and wondered, what happened to him? Did his X-shaped legs get worse? Lin Bo also tilted his chin with the same innocent face as Tang Wan's. I don't know, young people these days just don't pay much attention to their calcium. That night, Zhu Kuan was found to have acute uroschisis and couldn't urinate even when he wanted to. Unexpectedly, even after he was cured, he suffered from a subconsciously increased frequency of urination and wanted to urinate whenever he was nervous. This led to Zhu Kuan being dismissed from his job. He was unable to find another job no matter how hard he looked, because when he was interviewed, he'd become nervous, and when he was nervous, he will have the urge to wet his pants. No boss wanted such an employee. Later, in order to support his family, Zhu Kuan went to a desert star to plant trees. Alvin, the second young master in charge of the whole affair, was also confined by his father. When old Marquis Keppel received the report from Zhong He, he almost fainted. He lifted his cane and gave his youngest son several smacks. Seeking death. This was Marshal Zhong He not giving a fuss about them, leaving them a way out. The emperor was his cousin, a real member of the royal family, and he still held military power. He still went out looking for trouble. He really didn't know how to die. The old marquis, who was still catching his breath, immediately received a message from the young master Tang, which essentially said, "This duke doesn't need to be bothered with the trouble. Provoking waste. Don't let me see him again in the future." Old Marquis Keppel was really stunned. This deviate son had offended the Grand Marshal of the Empire and young Master Tang. The housekeeper stood behind the eldest young master expressionlessly, and exchanged a look with the young master. So far, the second young master not only failed to align himself with the big ship that was the young duke, his position in the old marquis' heart also fell sharply. The head of the family's position could be fixed, but the cost was a little high. In the future, they would have to take pains to repair it. That night, the old marquis and his wife went to the marshal's place to offer a humble apology and take the punishment. When Tang Wan got the news, he had already laid down and was tired. He had made so many dishes at noon, and had to undergo the check and record in the afternoon. He didn't want to move anymore, and Zhong He saw that he was tired. "You don't need to get up if you're tired, Lin Bo can handle it." Tang Wan sat up lazily. "They have the position of marquis, which isn't low." Zhong He disapproved. "What of it? I also inherited my father's title. I am older than him, and you are my partner. So that means they can see you whenever they want. Even when the prince sees you, he still needs to call you uncle. Tang Wan pondered over it, then immediately lay back down again without hesitation. Zhong He reached out and patted him on the head with a paw, satisfied. Sleep when you're tired. There was no impenetrable wall in the world. Beta Ursae Minori's circle of nobility was so large and their interpersonal relationships were complex. Soon, the nobles knew that the favorite host Tang Wan was the newlywed partner that Marshal Zhong He protected. The nobles who had wanted to investigate Tang Wan's identity before but failed were suddenly enlightened. No wonder they couldn't find it, the marshal guarded him too closely. However, for those who knew them, they also knew what they should and shouldn't say. Zhong He hadn't acknowledged Tang Wan as his partner to the world, so they couldn't announce it in advance. Normally, Zhong He would have really wanted to make a statement to everyone, but Tang Wan wouldn't let him. His reason was, it was too aggressive, you have to leave a way for others to live. It wouldn't be good that way. Actually Tang Wan had put more thought into it, he was worried that he would subject Zhong He to verbal abuse. With his work as a popular internet host, the lines between right and wrong were muddled, and sometimes it wasn't clear. Zhong He was a hero to the people of the empire. Now that Tang Wan was his partner, he must maintain the image of a hero. They could blacken him, but they couldn't blacken Zhong He. He wouldn't allow it. Duke Tang was a leading noble of the empire. Dukes of the Tang family had been marrying into the royal family for generations and had a prominent reputation. The whole family was dressed in subtle luxury, their identity as great nobles easily discerned at a glance. In such a big home, the air seemed to be stale, still and dreadful. Tang Tinji sat alone on the windowsill, facing the window. He pulled up his sleeves, showing his beautiful wrists with a brush in his hand and an easel in front of him. In that moment, he was painstakingly painting a portrait. As the night went on, the portrait was gradually taking shape. Surprisingly, it was taking on Tang Wan's appearance. A calm young man, carrying a cup of hot tea, approached him and said respectfully, "Young master, it's late. You still have to attend school tomorrow." The young master was still painting the eyebrows, his expression cold. He had cast aside his elegant demeanor, his dark eyes as deep as the sea, like a whirlpool of hidden danger. The young man looked at the figure in the painting and reminded him, "Young master, you must restrain yourself. Of course I know what I have to do. I can't see him right now, it's not time yet." The young duke looked down, his eyes swirling with dark and complex emotions. His hands fell gently again and stroke by stroke, the person in the painting became clearer. But he was the mysterious broadcaster. Have I troubled him? The man behind him remained silent, quietly listening. The young duke smiled. He set down his brush and looked at the man in the painting. He said softly, "I've always been interested in the marshal's wife. There is an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Looking at the silhouette on the news, I knew that it was him. But he didn't recognize me, he must be angry at me." At this time, there was a series of footsteps coming from the stairs. A 20-or-so-year-old handsome and elegant young man dressed in delicate white clothing was coming down the stairs. Standing for a moment, he could see the painting at a glance. His original quiet expression changed. The young duke looked up and smiled. "Older brother is still awake." Tang Yuan looked sternly at the young duke. "Tinji, who did you paint?" The young duke's lips curved up. "Who I painted, you don't know." Tang Yu's eyes flashed with a trace of annoyance. He went downstairs to the young duke and reminded him in a cold voice, "What you are doing now is enough to implicate the whole family. Don't touch that bottom line, we can't afford the consequences." The young duke smiled, his eyes fixed on his brother's. His eyes shone and gained a gentle and elegant appearance. "Older brother, you just have to be a good wife to the crown prince. Regarding family matters, I have let them go, you can rest assured." Tang Yu had never seen this expression of Tang Tinji's before. He was frightened by the shadows in his eyes. He stood in the same place in a daze, as if his feet had been rooted in place. He couldn't move at all. When he first saw him, Tang Tinji was a clever child, docile, filial, and clever. He had grown up in these past years and grew up graceful and quiet, becoming the perfect heir to the Duke. His eyes remained gentle. He had always treated his family with kindness and courtesy. Tang Yu never thought that Tang Tiny could have such an expression. Looking at him again, he was still an elegant and gentle teenager smiling back at him, as if everything had just been an illusion. Then he thought of the thinly veiled taunting in his words. Tang Yu's expression turned cold. He was sure that he had seen correctly, Tang Tinji did not like him. Tang Tinji carefully put the portrait away and told Tang Yu, "It's late, and older brother should also sleep earlier. Father and mother haven't been home these last 2 days, you shouldn't relax your studies either." Tinji. Tang Yu took a deep breath, and his voice could barely hide his sadness. "For so many years, I have always regarded you as my brother. In your heart, you don't even have a little." The young duke looked back and gently smiled. "I know. Older brother, go to bed early." Tang Yu body froze. He squeezed his fist tightly and couldn't say a word. He understood. In Tang Tinji's heart, his brother was that person. This half-brother of his was always the enemy of his own brother's perfect life. However, he couldn't say these words, because the whole family had been deceived by Tang Tinji's acting skills. Even his own mother felt that Tang Tinji did better than him. He was just the wife of the crown prince who wanted to stand on his own feet, but in the future, he had to rely on his younger brother. After Tang Tinji went up several steps, he suddenly stopped and placed his index finger against his lips with a smile. He said softly, "Don't say it, otherwise. Ha." Tang Yu nodded, his face pale, and he nodded minutely. After the false Meng Pet storm, Tang Wan didn't broadcast for a week, nor did he publish anything on Weibo until the starving fans panicked, fearing that Tang Wan would no longer be broadcasting under the stimulation he had faced. Every day, they were choking up blood on Weibo begging for Tang Wan to appear. Only a week later, Tang Wan languidly popped up on Weibo. Going live at 3 p.m. fans finally saw the light of dawn, weeping and holding on to Tang Wan. "You returned, we thought you were going to retire. What is the relationship between you and the marshal? Just what is the relationship, eh?" Hundreds of millions of letters written in blood, begging for a live broadcast. The observation report hadn't been written in several days, "Please let the pets out. I am studying the living habits of ancient Earth's creatures. Up till now, the information hasn't been filled in completely. Please broadcast live. Live broadcast, must live broadcast. I've been thinking about Jin Xiaopeng so much that I can't sleep. What is your relationship with the marshal? I really want to know. Is the marshal in good health? When will he formally return to the military department? Upstairs, don't ask. He's already offline. The fans. Tang Wan took a nap at noon, and it wasn't until it was nearly 3 o'clock that he finally slowly got up. After a brief brushing, he hugged Jin Xiaopeng and opened the live broadcast. He lazily greeted everyone, "Hi, good afternoon everyone." Comments rolled by so quickly that people couldn't tell what the audience was saying. They had many, many questions to ask. What is your relationship with the Marshal Ayaha? Was the checking site really at the Marshal's mansion? Oh, more intrigue. Chapter 25. What in the world does mythical beast mean? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Callous Editor. Walker Tang Wan saw that the comments were flooding by too quickly and nothing could be read. He opened the settings and told the audience. I'm going to revise it and let the system filter automatically. The questions asked most will pop out on their own, and the less asked ones will be screened out. If you want to contact and do business, you can find me on Weibo. The audience only wanted to say. If we found you, you might not be able to see, you have a magical skill, pretending to be blind. Tang Wan went on to say. I have opened the special function that will notify an official account, haha. Barrage. Don't pretend to be blind. What's the use of the settings when you pretend to be blind? There is a very good old saying. You will never be able to awaken a person feigning sleep. It's already been set up now. Being able to say such words, everyone's resentment towards Tang Wan's pretending to be blind is clear. Tang Wan touched his chin and wondered, do you guys have some misunderstanding about me? Barrage. Of course not. Tang Wan clapped Jin Xiaopang's two small paws. You all are so united, I'm touched. Tang Wan's fans were helpless. Seeing you heartless, you were banned before, remember. Why didn't you say a word? You should cry a bit, let us comfort you, not tease us. When Tang Wan saw the barrage, he held Jin Xiaopang in his arms and petted it. What's the use of crying? It's all over, it's been settled. The fans were still very dissatisfied. Before, Tang Wan had clearly been taken advantage of. If he didn't cry, how could the fans show their power? Dig him out and protect him together. Tang Wan cooperated and said, I was banned a few days ago and I was quick to cry when I was at home. Really, I was innocent, pitiful and weak. Please protect me. When he said that, everybody could see that he wasn't serious. He encouraged his fans to be happy. Fortunately, the staff of the Imperial Gene Security Department was fair and responsible. They checked and ensured that I was innocent, thank them. Because Tang Wan was like this, the fans were even more distressed, there were bitter things that couldn't be said. Many male and female fans exploded. They threw him rewards and comforted him. Don't be afraid, justice will stand on our side. Those who envy you are small and have short legs, and at adulthood will reach no more than 1.3 meters. Tang Wan laughed happily. Thank you guys. When the fans were comforted, they pulled out the question. What is the relationship between you and the marshal? Tang Wan didn't pretend to be blind this time. It's like the relationship between heroes and small citizens, between spiritual pillars and weak chickens. It's the same as yours. Sitting outside of the window basking in the sun, Zhong He's ears twitched. He subconsciously looked in the window. Tang Wan was carrying Jin Xiaopang, sitting crossed-legged on the mat. He couldn't tell if the statement was true or not. The corners of his lips hooked upwards and took it as being true. The audience still refused to let go of the topic and continued to ask. Tang Wan habitually ignored them. Fine then, if they continued to ask this question, Tang Wan would certainly pretend to be blind. The audience was familiar with this routine. However, the question of whether the testing site was at the marshal's mansion remained in the audience's hearts. At this time, someone asked. What exactly does Shenju Gu mean? Tang Wan had just grabbed a handful of melon seeds when he saw it, and he laughed so hard his hands shook. It's not easy to explain. I need to speak about civilization. A kind audience member stood up to explain for Tang Wan. I looked up a lot of information and a day later, I learned what Shenju Gu meant. It's an alpaca and originated from Earth's South America. At the beginning of the 20th century in the mysterious Oriental literary country, China, officials launched a special campaign to curb internet vulgarity and a large number of websites had to be shut down. Swear words were banned, so netizens invented swear words using homophonic words, such as grass.mud.horse, to bypass the website screenings. And gradually, grass.mud.horse was a representative of the 10 mythical creatures. An alpaca is one of the animals in the set of mythical creatures that Chinese netizens memed about. So, Shenju Gu means grass.mud.horse. This line was automatically highlighted by the system as an incisive comment, marked red. Audience. Tang Wan idly cracked melon seeds. He also called out Xian Feng, the Mao, Mao, San Mao. Up till all 7. After the audience reacted, they sighed with emotion. Don't offend Tang Tang in the future. Otherwise, if he scolds you, you wouldn't know that he scolded you. He's cultured, how frightening. If someone comes up to me later, I'll make them look like a mythical beast. The person who discovered this is a scholarly tyrant. Are you studying ancient Earth's folklore, brother? Earth is really interesting, I really want to go see it. Don't bother going to see it. It's all polluted and the atmosphere was destroyed. You have to wear protective clothing if you go there and would still need to check the data. There are no faults in the history. They were all taken when we immigrated. Tang Wan's expression stilled slightly and sighed in his heart. He had also thought about the day he would have the opportunity to go down and see Earth. Now, it seemed that it wouldn't be very convenient. In order to change the heavy topic and make himself feel better, Tang Wan clapped his hands and suggested, "For children, we can have a melon seed cracking competition." Xian Feng was so excited when it heard that as it ran around Tang Wan and the hamsters with its wings outstretched. Because Xian Feng had been known to pull hamsters into wheels and spinning them wildly, Tang Wan pulled several of the hamsters into his arms and vigilantly watched Xian Feng go mad. Jin Xiaopang, who was already in his arms, tilted its head and looked at the few small hamsters. It found that Tang Wan wasn't paying attention. It extended its paw and tentatively pressed it against a hamster. The audience was amused, their focus shifted and they went crazy over the cat's paw. Tang Wan quickly grabbed and pulled the cat's paws back and poked at Jin Xiaopang's head to frighten it. "Don't bully the weak." Jin Xiaopang innocently licked its paw. It didn't know what Tang Wan was talking about. Tang Wan pressed down the frenzied Xian Feng and arranged the hamsters. He gave 5 melon seeds to each of them. For children, the cracking melon seed contest has officially begun. We'll see who finished the quickest. At Tang Wan's command, all of the hamsters stuffed the seeds into their mouths. 2 seconds later, all of the hamsters had shoved the seeds into their mouth pouches. Xian Feng held a melon seed in its mouth and looked at the few hamsters with a dull look on its face, unable to respond to what had just happened. The comments were full of ha-has, shouting at the injustice. Where were the melon seeds? Heartbroken Xian Feng, "Child, take this money to go buy some snacks, too pitiful." Xian Feng cried. Xian Feng didn't know what happened and lost. No no no. Xian Feng might be thinking in its heart. You little group of dwarves, why didn't you spit out the melon seed shells? Tang Wan also didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He grabbed the Mao and pulled the melon seeds out of its mouth and wanted them to play fair. Then, he pulled out 5 peanuts, 3 soybeans, a piece of dried vegetable, a dozen grains of rice, 5 corn kernels. Finally, more than a dozen melon seeds. Tang Wan helplessly rubbed the Mao's head. How did you hide so many things? Panting, the Mao struggled to get down from Tang Wan's palms and hurried to collect all of the food on the table, not letting a single piece slip away. The audience was crying. Cute, want to raise QAQ. I also have a summoning ability, but I can only summon the dead. I want to summon something that can move. Once again, Tang Wan lined them up. He gave them 5 melon seeds each and told them. Only eat, don't hide. The hamsters seemed to understand Tang Wan's words. They each held a melon seed in their mouth and waited for Tang Wan's order. The fur children were so clever that Tang Wan was shocked. Were hamsters such clever animals? Normally, even if they were taught simple commands, it was impossible for all of them to understand him. Today's competition was already a more complex command. These little hamsters still understood it and stood in line waiting to crack melon seeds. Tang Wan was stunned. Given some time, would these fur children not mutate like beastmen and turn into humans? The audience, who didn't know what the hamsters were like, couldn't have thought of this. They all threw their rewards and begged for the competition to begin. There were a lot of people already on the internet helping shout. Ready. Start. Eat. Tang Wan reacted. As soon as the order was given, all that remained in the room was the sound of cracking melon seeds, cracking one by one. When Xian Feng cracked one, the hamsters had already cracked 2. The melon seed shells were tossed onto the table, they were really eaten. Xian Feng shouted angrily, "What we fight for is passion, what we fight for is speed. Can you eat faster than me?" Tang Wan wasn't happy. "Are you muddle-headed? They're eating faster than you and you're still wanting." Audience. Not knowing how to count is terrible, our heart aches for Xian Feng. Soon, the little hamsters crack all 5 melon seeds while Xian Feng had eaten only 3. The ignorant, silly bird still felt that it was amazing and arrogantly asked, "Do you guys have any?" "I have." "Do you guys have any?" "I have." "I have." The audience cried and laughed. The Xian Feng who doesn't know how to count was silly. "You lost, are you silly? Xian Feng, you bullied De Mao's family, don't say anymore. It's a pity that they can't speak. They won and yet they still can't say anything." The hamster brothers look confused, they don't understand Xian Feng's provocation. Xian Feng probably spoke with an accent. Ha 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 ha. Tang Wan was also happy. He placed Jin Xiaopeng aside, letting him find a comfortable place to sleep. He stretched out his hand and let Xian Feng hop onto his finger, bringing him closer to his chest and stroked it a few times. "Silly Feng, how can you be so cute?" Xian Feng was the type to act up in front of guests. As soon as Tang Wan gave it some attention, it would become splendid. Its exaggerating mouth. "Little brother, a kiss, muah. Little beauty, a kiss, muah. Little darling, a kiss, muah." Tang Wan pressed down on its head with a finger, discontent and at a loss. "Why are you such a fool?" At this time, a gust of wind blew through the window, disturbing Tang Wan's hair. Tang Wan squinted. Glancing over to the side, Zhong He was standing by the window with a solemn face and looked coldly at the silly bird who played tricks on his little partner. Tang Wan subconsciously put Xian Feng down. After he put it down, he felt that movement was very foolish and pulled it up again. Zhong He raised his eyebrow and left. Tang Wan. If it wasn't Zhong He who was silly, eating the bird's vinegar, then it was he who was silly, putting down the bird, frightened. After 2 hours of live broadcasting, the fans were happy. Tang Wan ended the live broadcast at 5 o'clock. He watched the rewards and happily closed the screen. He sent it to Zhong He. "Look, I cannot make money." When Zhong He saw it, he sent back N. Tang Wan was pleased. "It wouldn't be a problem at all for my finances to have a few cute kids. I still haven't divorced you. On the contrary, I give you good food and grooming service every day. The marshal must be grateful." Zhong He. N. With these two N, Tang Wan was satisfied. There definitely weren't many people who could make the marshal concede. Having gotten great satisfaction from Zhong He, Tang Wan habitually logged on to Weibo. After every live broadcast, he would go to Weibo to see if there are any suitable businesses to conduct. When he broadcasted live, he said he'd use the official account. Right now, he really had received a lot of goodwill on the account. They wanted to get in touch with Tang Wan and cooperate with him. But Tang Wan wasn't really interested and didn't look upon it. At this time, he got another message on his official account. Tang Wan first looked at the other's ID and unexpectedly raised his eyebrows. Luo Bingjun Studio. Luo Bingjun Studio at eating, sleeping, and scolding Dezhuang. "Hello, I'm Su Mi, the agent of Luo Bingjun Studio. Can we hire your families Dezhuang and Jin Xiaopeng to take a portrait with Luo Bingjun?" When this official message, Luo Bingjun's fans already exploded. June wants to release a portrait. God. The King of Heaven's first official portrait since his debut. No way, I'm suffocating. My June is going to release a photo album. This must be promised. Tang Tang. It wouldn't be a loss to cooperate with the King of Heaven. Tang Tang. Promise him. Promise him. Please promise him. Just like Tai Zhu promised Cui Hua. Fans were getting crazier and crazier, and the Weibo soon received hundreds of millions of responses. Tang Wan's fans were all excited, asking him to agree to cooperation between the head of the live broadcasting circle and the singing circle. Before the deal had even been settled, the fans had already gone mad. Luo Bingjun fans stood out. There were about equal numbers of Luo Bingjun and Tang Wan fans, but some of Tang Wan's fans were scholars studying paleontology who wanted to study the animal's behaviors during his live broadcasts. Because they paid attention to him, they weren't necessarily his fans. Luo Bingjun's fans were different. Almost all of the fans who followed him were loyal. Hearing that their idol wanted to take photos, they had decided he would carry the cat and pet it, and almost fainted with joy. There were also calls for De Zhuang. Tang Wan had some misconception that if he didn't promise, Luo Bingjun fans would storm the marshal's mansion with barrels of gasoline. The corners of Tang Wan's lips twitched. The other's popularity was so high, he had no reason to refuse. He just wanted to ask if Luo Bingjun was a human or a beast man, since the pricing would be different. If he was a beast man, what kind of species would he be? Furry. Long fur or short fur? Straight or not? If he's good looking, he'd coyly give him a discount. While he was thinking, he climbed from Su Mi's Weibo to Luo Bingjun's Weibo. Tang Wan found a picture of the King of Heaven. After seeing what the other person looked like, he was stunned. Black hair and dark eyes, long phoenix eyes, a tall nose, and a very handsome face. Tang Wan kneaded his forehead, and suddenly felt a little woozy and a bit blindsided. For some reason, this chapter was like pulling teeth. But Tang, you can't stray. You're a married man. Sigma, winky face. Chapter 26. I'm a face, Con, what about it? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Callous editor. Walker Tang Wan was stunned speechless. The King of Heaven looked just like a child he grew up and had a good relationship with. When he left home and had nowhere to go, he ran to the other's house. The uncle and aunt were good to him too, treating him as their son. Seeing that the other was also surnamed Luo, Tang Wan couldn't help but wonder. He can't really be the Luo's descendant. He grew like this, with his ancestors' traits. A year later, when he saw the familiar face again in the future, Tang Wan's heart became complex. His facial expression gradually sank, and he was lost in thought, looking at the person's photograph. Little did he know, he fell into Zhong He's gaze this way, his own partner absorbed in watching a small star. Tang Wan had past crimes. Before, he had looked at a little lump who had grown chubby and stumpy. Liking him was unacceptable. Because the beastman's fur was long, Tang Wan's heart was almost stolen away. Unexpectedly seeing Tang Wan revealing this kind of expression towards a person, the marshal immediately became alarmed. Zhong He quietly approached Tang Wan from behind and asked quietly, "This bald boy looks good." Tang Wan was startled. He didn't know if Zhong He's silent footsteps disease was curable. He subconsciously focused his attention onto Luo Bingjun for a few seconds. He didn't understand. Where is he bald? He has good facial features. Besides, he doesn't depend on his face to eat, he depends on his voice. He dared to defend him. Zhong He angrily slapped his palm against Tang Wan's light brain and closed it. Tang Wan raised his eyebrows. Was he mad? Humph. Zhong He snorted and stormed off. Tang Wan sat down and thought about it. What was Zhong He so suddenly angrily reacting towards? His eyes turned and quickly stood up, catching up with a diabolical laugh. Marshal. Wait for me. In my heart, you're the child with the most fur in the interstellar. Zhong He stumbled and his ears twitched. Tang Wan preferred those with more fur. He said that he had the most fur, didn't he? Zhong He's footsteps clearly slowed down a bit. Tang Wan quickly took a few steps to catch up and grabbed the other's clothing with one hand, following his steps. He unblinkingly soothed his temper. Not only are you the one with the most fur in the empire, you are also the most handsome in the whole empire. That kind of furless, bald child is like a hairless monkey. How could it compare to you? Passing servants and guards showed an ant smile at their pairs' backs. They were all relieved. A while ago, Furin had wanted to divorce their family's marshal. Now, he would sincerely praise the marshal. Not only was he handsome, but he also complimented his beast form. Indeed, they'd openly prostrate themselves in front of their family's marshal's military trousers. This was the charm of the marshal's personality. In their hearts, the marshal was all-powerful. It would be normal for him to conquer his partner's heart in a second. Anyways, their feelings were so good, would a baby not be far behind? They were already imagining that, in the future, there would be a little tiger as handsome as young Master De Zhuang. No one knew whose child De Zhuang was, that wasn't important. What was important was that the baby the two would give birth to would be like that little tiger. Absolutely. Zong He didn't stop until he reached the end of the corridor. He looked at Tang Wan with a serious face. He mustn't think that he would forgive him for his unyielding attitude. He used his facial expression to show that he couldn't be coaxed. However, Zong He had already slowed down his glances and betrayed his inner thoughts. Tang Wan held some kind of illusion that Zong He would become a big cat and rub his face against his neck. In the depths of his heart, he was already pleased with himself. Tang Wan laughed and explained in a good tone, "They just wanted to cooperate with me and rent my cat for a photo." Zong He humphed. "I knew that you didn't like those bald children." Tang Wan continued to appease him. Of course, he's only 10 million people's idol. The whole empire has more than 300 planets and hundreds of billions of people. You're popular amongst everyone, his could only count as a minority. Zong He's expression was still solemn. Tang Wan almost stifled it and laughed. An unexpected this big cat was really confident and a little narcissistic. "Brother, right, De Zhuang hasn't come in a few days. Shouldn't he come over for the weekend?" Tang Wan's mood dropped. Missed him. Zong He's expression changed and he turned away, not wanting to see Tang Wan's disappointed face. He's going to school. He doesn't have free time. Oh. Tang Wan was heartbroken. After all, De Zhuang wasn't his own child, he needed to learn how to let go. In the evening, Tang Wan sent Su Mi a private message. De Zhuang isn't a cat. He went to school and doesn't have time. I have other breeds of cat, all with soft temperaments. Will that do? Tang Wan wasn't looking at how much the other could give, but the other's fan traffic. There was always a barrier between the live broadcast circle and the singing circle. There were still differences between the fans. If they cooperated, then their followings would surely increase and they would become more popular. Anyway, De Zhuang's temper definitely wouldn't fit. Tang Wan didn't want to force De Zhuang to do something he didn't like for his own sake. Soon, the other replied. "Hello, we will deliberate on our side a little bit more, he has taken a liking to De Zhuang." Tang Wan read the message and wasn't very happy. Aside from De Zhuang, there was only one Jin Xiaopang. The range that the other could choose from was too narrow. Besides, from listening to the other side, they would choose De Zhuang. Tang Wan looked at his own system. He had spent the points from before, and he didn't have enough points to purchase a cat. Right now, buying a ragdoll cat, a short-legged cat, or a tabby cat was very expensive, needing more than 10 million points. If he wanted to accumulate so much popularity in a short time, he could only live broadcast again. Tang Wan was thinking, what could he do to get popular quickly? It was only during dinner that Tang Wan finally figured it out. He could issue a raffle. He could call out all his Meng pets, take many beautiful pictures, then gift the portraits to the winner of the raffle. The new generation of the new age didn't know what the wisdom of an internet celebrity was. It seemed like no one had ever raffled things off before. That evening, Tang Wan released the smaller children, like Luo Bei and the hamster brother, and took pictures of them under beautiful lighting. He took photographs of them playing with toys, eating things, lying asleep, and in all kinds of Meng states, until 11 o'clock. Zong He noticed that he hadn't come to sleep, and personally went to capture him. Only then would he drop the subject. Tang Wan woke up early the next day and released the big fur children, chasing after their butts for photographs. When he took pictures of Shenju Gu, he changed its hairstyle several times. He picked some flowers from the garden and wove them into garlands to wear around its neck, but Shenju Gu was convinced of his own beauty and ran away in the garden. Tang Wan couldn't pull him back. Tang Wan once again recited in his heart. Won't raise a husky. Won't raise a husky. Won't raise a husky. After all the photos were taken, Tang Wan made several photo albums, one for each pet. Then, he meticulously retouched the images, uploaded them to his Weibo, and issued the raffle. It was for his followers. He'd pick out 100 people and there would be a calendar of designated photos for each of them. In an era of emphasized intellectual property rights, it had never been heard of for a person to send out their own things. Tang Wan had immediately opened a big new door in the broadcasting circle. It could also be this way. In order to get a calendar of cute pictures, everybody crazily forwarded it. Tang Wan's fans excitedly slammed on a table. If you can do this kind of manipulation, why didn't you do it earlier? What were you doing before? We won't only forward it, we'll forward it 10,000 times. I want a complete set. Want. Complete. Set. When Tang Wan saw this, he wanted to ask. You wouldn't go to wash in the sauna late at night, you want what complete set? Fans. I feel like someone is driving, but there's no evidence. Of course, some people despised Tang Wan's disruptive manipulations, thought that his table manners were bad. In order to raise his number of fans, he could do this kind of thing. Did he not want face? It didn't count if Tang Wan couldn't see it. If the comments had relatively more likes, they would be bumped up for him to see. He would just paste a picture of Shenju Gu under the others' comments. After being trampled by Tang Wan several times, no one dared to say anything about him. He cursed people without vulgar words. In the event that he scolded them, they would have to look up that information. If you couldn't find it and someone else did, it would be even more humiliating. With the increasing number of forwards, the fans surged forward again. Countless people rushed towards the stage with a hold and try attitude. What if they became one of the 100 lucky ones? They wouldn't be able to resist carrying them on their shoulders. A day later, Tang Wan looked at the system's popularity. He wanted to buy a ragdoll cat, a short-legged cat, a tabby cat, a Scottish fold, and an Angola. He was still many points away. In order to buy the cats, Tang Wan decided to broadcast live again. In order to cooperate with the big stars and gain more popularity, he wouldn't mind implementing the creating a star program, and turning his Meng pets into interstellar-wide big stars. As long as the population value went up, he would raise 100 pandas in the future, so that his home would become a fluffy paradise. However, what could he broadcast to quickly increase the number of fans? Tang Wan stood underneath the flower bridge. He leaned against it with a cup of black tea in his hands. He looked into the distance, lost in thought. If De Zhuang could come, then it would be good. He would have been able to give him a lot of inspiration. As expected, the Face.Con's world would need to be rocked by his attractiveness index. At this time, Zong He became a small kitten. He unhappily took strong and vigorous steps to find Tang Wan. He smacked his paws against the floorboards. Because he did so with force, every step came with a thump. Zong He was angry with himself. What did his habits make him become? Too unruly. Too finicky. The more this happened, the worse it would be. But when he thought of Tang Wan's disappointed look when he couldn't see De Zhuang, he couldn't help but be soft-hearted. He left behind his reluctance, kneeling to gain favor. Lo Tang Wan heard the movement and slightly turned to the side. The moment he saw De Zhuang, his eyes lit up. "Zhuang, Daddy missed you." Tang Wan happily ran over, spun De Zhuang in a circle, and picked him up, rubbing his face. He suddenly had an idea. "I really am a face.con." Tang Wan really admired himself. De Zhuang's attractiveness could really inspire him. When Zong He looked at Tang Wan's scorching eyes, he immediately regretted it. He had a bad feeling, did Tang Wan want to sell him off? When they introduced the flower bridge I thought that we would actually get some CP action but bamboozled again, times. Chapter 27. Crazy Earth's Man. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 27. Crazy Earth's Man. Translator. Callous Editor. Walker. When Tang Wan saw De Zhuang, he had a flash of inspiration. He was going to make a handicraft cute felt meng pet. He couldn't do anything else, he could only make a cat. So, he was making the cat he was most familiar with. De Zhuang. He would make a troop of De Zhuangs. An entire house full of De Zhuangs. Thinking of a house full of the top-tier beauty De Zhuang, Tang Wan was so overjoyed that he could float. Zong He suddenly shivered. He felt that something bad was going to happen soon. Tang Wan picked him up in an 100-meter dash and rushed into the warehouse to look for unused materials. He asked while running, "Child, did you get heavier? What do the teachers give you to eat? Can you talk to me?" Zong He's life was like cooled ash. "Meat. Aya De Zhuang knows how to say meat. Now that you can say a word or two, you can say a complete sentence in the future." How frightening. Being praised this way, Zong He only wanted to cover up his face with his paws. He was very clear on one thing. They were two people, if Tang Wan wasn't the idiot, then he was. Tang Wan found the materials in the corner of the warehouse. They were all packed in bags and he picked them up with one hand, and carried the nearly 8 kilograms De Zhuang in the other. He felt that his own strength was bursting and walked like the wind. It was De Zhuang's shed fur that he had collected, and later, Zong He's fur. Zong He had a lot of fur and it was very long. Tang Wan brushed his fur every day. There were times that he couldn't brush through, and still needed to tug a few times. Collected together, there were a lot. Zong He put his paws up on Tang Wan's shoulder. He had given up on struggling and put his head on his shoulders. He closed his eyes and slept. In the evening, Tang Wan placed a stool behind his chair and a thick mat in front of him. He opened the live broadcasting studio. Welcome to the Earth Meng Pet Live Broadcasting Studio. Today, I'll be taking everyone through making handicrafts, especially magical. An empty palm can turn into De Zhuang, and then turn into a lot of De Zhuangs. Zong He had been sleeping behind Tang Wan, his ears twitched and perked up, and he cracked open his eyes. He looked at Tang Wan's thin back and resisted shifting back, then pressing him onto the bed and rubbing against him. What did he mean by, a lot of him? The audience was also curious. What does a lot of De Zhuangs mean? De Zhuang was so handsome that he could turn over the entire broadcasting studio. What would a lot of him be like? I just want one De Zhuang, that would be enough. You have the original handsome De Zhuang. Open the touch function. I haven't just wanted to pet De Zhuang for only 1 or 2 days. Why won't you let me pet him? Yes. We want De Zhuang. If you don't let us pet him, you'll lose fans. Blacklist. We can't play happily, disband. #K2026, #K2026. When Tang Wan saw this, he raised his eyebrows and provoked fiercely. Then I won't open it, you guys bite me. De Zhuang is mine, only I can touch. Barrage. This is the first time we've seen a host who loved to tease their fans this much. Just what do we goddamn like about him? I'm probably a trembling M, even if I can't see his face or expression. Hearing him so arrogant, I feel comfortable hearing arrogance. I said it earlier, you don't have to struggle. De Zhuang is in his heart, darling, right? His Weibo name is eating, sleeping, and petting De Zhuang. Clearly, it would be impossible for him to continue living without De Zhuang. Tang Wan turned around and placed his hand on the sleeping cat. Yes, every day I am eating, sleeping, and petting De Zhuang. The barrage screamed. De Zhuang's fur, petting it would be exceedingly smooth. Tang Wan smiled and happily told them, yes, it feels very good, soft and smooth. Look here, he's chubby. Tang Wan wanted to pull up De Zhuang's hind legs and show everyone his stomach, where the fur was even softer. Zong He opened his eyes and glared at him coldly. He wanted to thrash him. Showing your husband's stomach to others, are you stupid? Faced with the other's gaze, Tang Wan felt guilty. In his heart, he felt like De Zhuang, this child, had more and more of a big cat's temperament. His gaze was unwilling to let Tang Wan go. Well then. He was an adult who would respect young cubs. He needed to give him face. If he didn't want them to see it, then they wouldn't see it. Fine, fine, I won't tease anymore. We can continue on and start. To those friends who are interested and have beast men in their families, you can brush out their fur. Don't throw it away. I can make a tutorial video and teach everyone how to use it as felt. It's like this. Tang Wan took out alternating black and gold fur. This is the fur I collected from De Zhuang. You can use this to make an identical model of a beast man, and give it to the beast man when the time is right, guaranteed to startle them. The audience's interest had been raised. As it turned out, the shed fur can be used in this way. There were people whose gazes were already trained on their partners. It was time to start. Tang Wan hadn't thought that his manipulations would bring the entire population to fur fever. There are several parts that make up De Zhuang. A round head, an oval body, long legs, a tail, and indescribable places. Unable to bear what Tang Wan was saying, Zong He gave him a swipe. What did indescribable places mean? Tang Wan turned around to coax him, child, other places can be left unmade, but the eggs must be there. Otherwise, it wouldn't be complete. Zong He only wanted to smack him to death. A barrage. M.tsk.tsk.um. No one knew what to say. What Tang Wan said had made a lot of sense. However, they always felt that when they wanted to ridicule him, they couldn't do it. It was stifling and uncomfortable. Concerned, Tang Wan told them, if you're constipated, you need to go see a doctor. Otherwise, it would be very easy for something to go wrong. The audience. This type of host, why is he so popular? Irrational. After entertaining the audience, Tang Wan enthusiastically introduced to everyone, these parts are done separately, and then poked together. Okay then, start from the head. You smooth the fur like this, then you roll it up. Typically, however big you want to make one, you can roll it that size. Pay attention to the inside, so that it isn't too loose. From experience, if it's too loose, it will be hollow and flat when it's done. It would become flat with a pinch. You wouldn't want to create a head from a traffic accident. The audience watched with great concentration, but there were still people ridiculing. I actually saw a homemade product and became fascinated. After I learned this, I can tell my mother. I'm a skillful little expert. Don't talk, watch carefully, and afterwards, grab your partner's fur. Tang Wan also took out a foam board and placed 2 needles on the table. I'm certain that after I finish, there would be companies that would come to me for authorization. Later, they'll come out readily. Made material packages that you can buy. Companies that want to take over the project, you can at my official account at this time, the system prompted. Supreme VIP Good Baby Production Company Number 1. My little brother, I came gimme gimme gimme. Happy cooperation Mua Mua. Tang Wan raised his eyebrows. Well, the projected has been contracted with the big brothers of Good Baby Production Company Number 1. In the future, you can look for them to buy materials bags from them. Tang Wan placed the rolled hair on the foam board and poked it with a needle, pulling the hair into a ball. Don't keep poking the same place, otherwise that place will become flat. This is work that requires patience. Continuously poke closely, and finish it up with thin stitches. After that, use scissors to trim a bit of the extra fur. Then, the shape of De Zhuang's head should have been mostly formed. Zhong He cracked open his eyes and glanced at it. He almost blinded himself. These are the ears, poke a pair. Continue on to the body, we'll continue to poke. Barrage. Making these kinds of things, it's just poking and poking. I think I can do it too. Robotic servants can also do it, just poke poke poke. I think I can poke out my family's child in a day. It's so simple, just needs to be poked. In his heart, Tang Wan felt that they could wait. With no experience, not only would they break the needle, they would also poke their hands. The heads they'd make wouldn't be round and the size of the body wouldn't match. The most terrible thing was ugly. Very ugly. So ugly that it would burn your eyes. Hopefully, after they made it, it wouldn't give rise to a family war. After Tang Wan poked all the parts, he started connecting them. Connecting them is very simple. You just have to link them together and, like before, poke poke poke. The kitten's form was gradually taking shape. With Tang Wan's poke poke poke, it resembled De Zhuang more and more. Tang Wan pressed in gold-dyed eyes, and it looked even more like the kitten. Tang Wan placed the kitten on top of De Zhuang's head and asked everyone. Isn't it like father and son? This time, the audience was conquered by Tang Wan's skillful hands, and they all praised. What can't you do? It's too similar. It's a perfect imitation, simply a miniature version. I want to learn this too. I want to make a family portrait. Seek out the materials bag. When will it be on the market? Tang Wan doesn't need to show his face in the future, he can rely on those hands to eat. Are you a master sculptor? How can you know how to do everything? Tang Wan smiled and said. I can't do sculpture, I can only make handicrafts and trinkets. Say, do you guys think that it's still missing something? The audience agreed together. Eggs. Tang Wan looked apologetically at the cat sleeping behind him. Right, it's still missing the eggs. Zhong He opened his eyes and stood up. He just wanted to raise his claws and smack them into paste, this disaster. Big baby, don't be angry, there's nothing to be angry about. Tang Wan gently pet and smoothed his fur, from the top of his head to the tip of his tail. It can't be that you don't want eggs. Normal males need eggs. Zhong He was so angry that his teeth and claws were pasted against Tang Wan's head. The fur on his tail stood up one by one, his fur puffed with rage. Tang Wan wasn't afraid of him. He was patient and coaxed, it can't be that you don't want eggs. Then okay, I won't make them. If these words fell into a normal beastman's ears, it would be unbearable. Your partner saying that you had no eggs, and you wouldn't be angry. But letting him do it would still make him angry. So, this part of the body is indispensable. Tang Wan had a solemn face, but his eyes were hiding a laugh. Teasing De Zhuang every day, this kind of living was beautiful. Regardless of De Zhuang's expression, Tang Wan was already pulling together a ball of fur. Zhong He's entire body stiffened. Watching Tang Wan's white and slender fingers deftly rubbing and pinching. His heart was suspended, but nobody knew what he was thinking. His ears turned red. Then Tang Wan pressed the little ball onto the foam board and picked up the needle. Zhong He. Sorry for the late update, school started again. Chapter 28. A Sudden Change. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Callous Editor. Walker Tang Wan was extremely fast, poking. While he poked, he told everyone, for these types of small hairballs, when you poke, you must be careful and not prick your hand. When you first start, take it slow. After you get used to it, your speed will naturally increase. Still, you need to wear protective gloves. The audience watched Tang Wan poke the fur ball. They all nodded their heads and didn't know how to respond. They felt an inexplicable pain for De Zhuang's eggs. Zhong He, who had been standing beside Tang Wan, saw his action and almost choked. He smacked him with his paws several times, but Tang Wan's hands didn't stop. He also pushed him aside with his chin, indicating, "Don't make trouble, Daddy is making eggs for you." Zhong He gave off an upset, "ah-woo," then jumped off the chair, and ran off in a fury. He couldn't stand it anymore. Tang Wan looked back and said regretfully, "Oh, this child. His temperament is getting worse." When the two little balls were finished, Tang Wan needed to press them onto the small kitten. Only then did he notice. I made them too big. Pressing on such large balls, it doesn't really fit. Fine, that's not important. Press them on. Standing in the doorway and breathing deeply, Zhong He, who had already cooled his internal heat, slipped underfoot. His entire body stiffened. He felt that De Zhuang got big. Thinking of this, Zhong He scratched against the wall a good number of times in embarrassment and left several deep gouges. It was fine for just the husband and wife to know about these kinds of things. What are you doing, putting it out in the open? He had gone insane. After waiting for Tang Wan to connect the parts, he noticed that the disharmony was somewhat serious. Forget it, we'll pull it back down. You won't see the but in any case. Zhong He. Tang Wan's series of coquettish manipulations made Zhong He so incensed that his fur stood up on end. He rushed back into the bedroom to shift back into his human form to calm himself down. He had the urge to drag Tang Wan back, take off his pants and let him tug. Would you dare to reach your hand out and tease them? Zhong He steadies himself. This image was too poisonous, he was going to go mad. At this time, Tang Wan had already completed the first De Zhuang, and the audience was stunned. Too amazing. These hands are too magical. It's exactly the same. Were your hands kissed by a god? Tang Wan chucked. Next, I will speed up, let's make a row of De Zhuangs. Make them with all kinds of expressions. Barrage. A row of De Zhuang without eggs. Tang, you really can. If De Zhuang knew, he'd be mad. Wait a bit for me, I'll go gather some fur and practice. I also need to go gather some fur, wait for me. Tang Wan agreed. I'll have a drink of water and wait 5 minutes for you, BDNV barrage. 5 minutes is enough. Those upstairs, are you a devil? You want to collect that much fur in 5 minutes, you want to make your partner go bald. No, I picked up some scissors. What the fuck? There's this kind of method. No fear, the weather's warm right now. If the fur grows, it'll be hot. If they're bald it can still regrow. Tang Wan silently lit a row of incense for the beast men. He really hadn't thought that it could be done in this way. Tang Wan felt that he was really too good to Zhong He. Look at other people's partners, were they all devils? In order to show that he really was good to his partner, he screenshotted the barrage and sent them to Zhong He. I found a new method for grooming. In short, teasing the big cat after teasing the little kitten. Both of them were Zhong He, who had just calmed his anger. Once he saw this, he was so angry that his face turned red. Still wanted to cut his fur. He'd rebel. Imagining Zhong He's expression, Tang Wan couldn't help but laugh and turn his head to look at the entrance's direction. Unfortunately, he couldn't see what was going on in the other room at all. Unexpectedly, when he laughed, the audience called out. This laughter melts the heart, and his normal laughter seems to be somewhat different. I want to see what you look like. You have a good voice and good hands, you must be very good. Looking. No, maybe he's ugly. It's because of that ugliness that he won't show his face. Last time we saw, your hair was black. Are you pure Asian? The world is so big, pure Asian beauties are rare. With those kinds of looks, why wouldn't he show them? Probably because he's ugly. The audience followed the tide. Yes, you're ugly. Otherwise, you'd turn off the face cover and show us. Tang Wan shrugged, it doesn't matter. I don't eat using my face. What does it matter if I look good? Reverse psychology won't work on me. Barrage. Only beautiful people can have such confidence. No. Ugly people who have no desire to struggle have this mentality. In other words, there were two extreme perceptions in the barrage. The host is a great beauty. The host is shameful and ugly. At this time, there was also a special person watching the live broadcast. It was the one who made Tang Wan recall his ancestor, Luo Bingjun. Heavenly King Luo's entire body was huddled on top of a small stool, a bag of snacks in his hand. As he ate, he murmured, "Cute, too cute." Su-mi, his manager, looked at the felt craft that Tang Wan made, and said with a smile. Really very cute, so I wanted to cooperate with him. His cat is sure to attract countless people's eyes. Luo Bingjun shook his head. I didn't say that his cat was cute, I said that he was cute, very cute. Su-mi stared at him with loathing on her face. Ancestor. I beg you not to court disaster. Be honest with me. Heavenly King Luo tissed a few times, and kindly urged the irritable manager. Now, the world is peaceful, and humans and beast men coexist peacefully. The world is so beautiful, but you're so violent. Being like this is too bad, not good at all. Su-mi was so angry that she wanted to kick him off. You, shut up. At this moment, Luo Bingjun's expression became startled. He suddenly noticed that there was something wrong with Tang Wan's movements in the middle of the live broadcast. He stopped shoving snacks into his mouth. His eyes subconsciously widened as he stared at the person on the screen. Tang Wan had trembled and put down the needle. Because during the live broadcast, his mind was connected to his spiritual strength. Now, the person in the image became distracted. This showed that the spirit of the host wasn't very good. He seems to be very uncomfortable. At this time, Tang Wan really was feeling uncomfortable. Just now, his head suddenly started aching, as if it had been stabbed by a needle. He had a splitting headache. It was as if his head was swelling so much that he felt like it would explode in the next second. Tang Wan put down his needle, trembling, wanting to stand up and call someone, but as soon as his butt left the stool, his brain buzzed. He couldn't control his body and fell over headfirst. Behind him, an army-green shadow rushed in and scooped him up, crying anxiously. Tang Wan. When Tang Wan blearily opened his eyes and saw Zong He clearly, he felt at ease and lost consciousness. In his mind, there was only one thought. It's over. I'm afraid that it might be a sudden terminal illness. With Tang Wan's fainting, the live broadcast was cut off. The last thing the audience saw was the blurred image of a man in a military uniform rushing over. Tang Wan had fainted without warning, and there had been nothing wrong with his appearance. Zong He held Tang Wan in his arms and called for a military doctor as he ran out. It was the first time Lin Bo had seen Zong He so panicked. In the past, he hadn't shown so much emotion no matter how big or small the occasion was. Even when he was injured, he hadn't had such an expression. He sighed in his heart, whoever lost their heart first would lose. Zong He had lost completely. He advised. Don't panic, it'll be alright. Furen is in good health. After he arrived, the servants took good care of him. There's nothing seriously wrong with him. If you panic, the family won't have a pillar. Zong he nodded calmly, call a few more military doctors, and I'll bring him to the treatment room. Within a minute, the military doctor had rushed into the treatment room and examined Tang Wan's complexion. He promptly decided, there's a problem with Furen's spiritual strength. I'll have to check it. Zong he hissed. Why are you wasting time on words? Check. The military doctor had no choice but to say, how can I check if you're holding him so tightly? Only then did Zong he lay Tang Wan down. At this time, Tang Wan's complexion became increasingly red, his body temperature also rising. Zong he touched his forehead, his eyes deep. He has a high fever. The military doctor looked at him calmly, and found the reason after a little bit of examination. This is a sign of awakening in ability. For at least 3 days, the higher he burns, the stronger the ability would be. Saying this, the military doctor also wondered, it should be impossible. Abilities are generally awakened when they're in their teens. When they awaken later, it's usually because of a life-threatening event. Their potential was stimulated, usually a case of overdrawing their spiritual strength, and only a few will survive. It's impossible for Furen to awaken his ability in such a comfortable situation. In this case, I have a guess, but I'm not sure. Can I give Furen a blood test? A blood sampling test, an ancient method of detection, had long been eliminated. Usually, blood sampling was only needed for testing toxins that remained in the body. Zong he stared at the military doctor with a serious face and suspicious eyes, as if to say, you idiot, even after giving you the equipment you can't figure it out, you also really need to draw his blood. You're not afraid of being an idiot. The corners of the doctor's mouth twitched. What else could he say? Lin Bo aptly said. Check it. We must know why he suddenly became like this. If there is someone taking revenge, we must know where the root is. The military doctor took out a needle and pricked Tang Wan's finger under Zong He's cold eyes and took 2 drops of blood. In order to alleviate the pressure brought on from Zong He's gaze, the military doctor had to find another topic, what is Furen's situation? Lin Bo answered, he doesn't know it himself, he said that he lost his memory. Nobody knew if it was real or not, but he's a good child. The marshal likes him very much. Zong he frowned. You're talking too much. The military doctor laughed, he had already seen it. The marshal not only liked him, but loved him desperately. Your elder says he's a good child, so he must be outstanding. After the blood was drawn, the military doctor quickly used a band-aid and wiped Tang Wan's finger clean. Marshal, don't glare at me anymore. Burning up like this, Furen had long since been unable to feel pain. Nonsense. Zong he gave the military doctor another glare. A fake doctor. Military doctor. His Majesty had once praised him as the best doctor in the whole younger generation of the empire. For this marshal, he had been grabbed into the military division. Now, the marshal scolded him as a quack. Alas, married men were so fickle. Poor Tang Tang. Omega. At least he's got a doting husband to take care of him. Chapter 29. A big pile of mysteries. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Callous Editor. Walker. It wasn't until the evening that Tang Wan strove to open his heavy eyelids. At a glance, he could see that Zong he was keeping watch over him. Faced with the other's worried eyes, Tang Wan tried to laugh and comfort him. Don't worry, I'm not uncomfortable. Zong he angrily tucked in a corner of the blanket. Burning up like this and still saying that you're not uncomfortable, you're so stupid you could die. The corner of Tang Wan's lips twitched, but he had no strength to argue. Zong he painstakingly touched his burning forehead and replaced his fever-reducing plaster with a new one. He was obviously a weak chicken pretending to be strong. How foolish. Drink some water and go back to sleep. Tang Wan obediently drank the water. At that time, the military doctor came in with the test report and saw Zhong He's basket of fever-reducing plasters. His lips quirked up. Marshal, these fever-reducing plasters can last 24 hours, not 24 minutes. Replacing it so soon is just wasting materials. Zhong He frowned coldly, and the military doctor withered. As long as you're happy. Tang Wan saw the used fever-reducing plasters that the doctor mentioned. His heart warmed and he looked at Zhong He with a smile. This big cat, what should he say? The test report has come out. Do you want me to say it out now, or do you want to look at it yourselves? Tang Wan asked. Mine. Yes. Please explain it to me. I wouldn't necessarily understand it myself. The military doctor laughed. He thought that Tang Wan was joking with him and believed that the marshal's wife had a good temperament. Seeing that the marshal had no objection, he said, from your blood, I found traces of H6V drugs. Tang Wan didn't understand, but Zhong He's expression changed and fierce murder flashed through his eyes. Subconsciously, the military doctor kept away from him and continued, it's a chronic poison, outlawed in the entirety of the interstellar because it can damage a person's spiritual strength. It can turn a genius into a waste, colorless and talentless. It's very convenient to use and can't be detected by any non-top military equipment. Because of its terrible nature, it was forbidden to circulate it in the interstellar. They don't even dare to sell it on the black markets. They're not available to ordinary people or nobles. It's very expensive, and not something that the average person can afford. After listening, Tang Wan said lightly, so, after I lost my memories, I was poisoned for a long time. His calm expression surprised the military doctor. The marshal's wife was much tougher than ordinary people. He had been tortured like this, but still had no reaction at all. The military doctor explained, yes, the good thing is that your body has been taken good care of after you were broken off the drug. I'm guessing that someone gave you treatment. In the year that you came to the marshal's mansion, when his spiritual strength was damaged, and frequently receiving spiritual strength replenishing medicines, the poison was almost treated completely. Now, there are only a small amount of drugs left, and with so many situations coming together, you awakened your ability late. In this way, your ability should be the rare healing ability because your spiritual strength has the ability to heal itself. As soon as Tang Wan heard that it wasn't a terminal illness, his heart relaxed. He gave a weak hum, closed his eyes, and fell asleep again. His calm manner stunned the military doctor. This was also okay. From these words, Zhong He got another meaning, you're saying that someone treated him. The military doctor said firmly. Yes. The treatment must not be cheap. Yes, the treatment is just as expensive. An average person can't afford it. Zhong He's expression was cold, I understand. He touched Tang Wan's forehead, and his eyebrows gradually furrowed. It seemed that there were some things that they still hadn't figured out. When Tang Wan was fully awake, 3 days had passed and he still had a fever, which needed to be reduced by taking medicine. Lin Bo took 2 pills over to Tang Wan's side with a smile. Come on, take some medicine. Tang Wan swallowed his saliva nervously. The thing he hated the most was taking medicine. With Lin Bo's seemingly gentle but firm manner, Tang Wan took the 2 pills as he was told. Like he was facing death, he put them into his mouth and drank down a whole glass of water. At this time, Lin Bo quickly grabbed Tang Wan's nose, and as soon as he opened his mouth, he poured the medicine into it. Lin Bo held Tang Wan's chin and lifted it up. Tang Wan hadn't reacted yet, and with a gulp, it went down. That was bitter. Suffering, Tang Wan's eyes teared up. Lin Bo stuffed a piece of candy in his mouth. This medicine is precious, this mouthful is over 10,000 star coins. When Tang Wan heard that it was so much money, he nodded through the tears and put in all his effort into chewing the candy. Lin Bo rubbed his head like a child. All right, all right. This is to remove the toxins from your body. The military doctor spent a lot of time looking for it. If you spit it out, the military doctor will kneel and cry. Tang Wan looked admiringly at Lin Bo. Let him drink the medicine and spit it back out. This bitter, it was inhuman. The old man has squeezed his nose and poured half the bottle of medicine into his mouth. Tang Wan lay on bed powerlessly, staring at the ceiling in a daze. Advanced technology couldn't save a person who didn't like to take medicine. What kind of advanced technology was it? At this time, his hand was caught by the person beside him and was kneaded, clumsily comforted. The corner of Tang Wan's lips raised, but his gaze was more serious. You've been keeping watch over me this entire time, aren't you tired? Zhong He nodded and admitted, tired. Tang Wan couldn't help but laugh. This time, he was actually being straightforward. Then you're still here guarding me. The military doctor said that I was okay, and I just need to take some medicine. Zhong He unhappily pressed Tang Wan back down so that he could sleep. Even without speaking, Tang Wan could understand the other's thoughts. The marshal was saying. What nonsense are you saying? Rest. The other had taken care of him. He considered himself to have taken it for granted. Tang Wan cocked his head and looked at Zhong He with wide eyes, and willfully asked, why are you so kind to me? Zhong He asked angrily. Aren't you speaking nonsense? If I'm not good to you, who should I be good to? Tang Wan pursed his lips. The bottom of his heart was suddenly tugged by something. There was some pain, and the feeling was rising. It was hard to bear. How long had it been since someone had so simply said such heartfelt words? The simpler it was, the more sincere it was, leaving his heart feeling stuffed up and panicked. After a long while, Tang Wan finally said. Zhong He, if you can treat me like this for an entire lifetime, I will live it with you with all my heart and soul. Zhong He didn't even think about it. He immediately told him. Then you can't run away in your whole life. Tang Wan laughed. This big cat was really confident. How fickle. You must be tired, come up and sleep. Tang Wan moved to the side of the bed and gave some space to Zhong He. Zhong He looked at it, took off his point, and laid down beside Tang Wan. Tang Wan gave him a push, you, become a big cat. Zhong He tisk, d. How could he rely on cuteness but still be proud? Tang Wan blinked, knowing that Zhong He could be persuaded by reason but not cowed by force. He looked at him in grievance. Zhong He sighed and took on the burden. He could only transform into a 2-meter long, furred tiger. Tang Wan pounced over at once, hugged Zhong He's neck, and rubbed. There wasn't any bitterness in his mouth anymore and he wasn't gambling with his heart anymore. Tang Wan buried his face in Zhong He's neck, thinking about what had happened recently. What he had gotten wasn't a terminal illness, but picked up another small life. Remembering that he had consumed poison, and then medicine, and thinking of all the possibilities that could have occurred before, Tang Wan felt that the original had been wronged. He also had a headache from the trouble that the original left behind. What exactly had I gone through before? You said that I had a wicked stepmother who was afraid that I was fighting for property and fed me poison every day. Just like Lin Bo. I don't want it poured down my throat. Zhong He narrowed his eyes and placed his arms around Tang Wan to comfort him. Lin Bo is doing it for your own good. Tang Wan took this opportunity to rub his hand along the tiger's fur, rub, using force to rub the marshal bald. There was nothing that cats couldn't solve. If there was, then just rub. Zhong He raised his head and placed his neck on top of Tang Wan's head. He narrowed his eyes and comfortably rumbled. At this time, Lin Bo finished tidying up and passed through the door. He smiled and said. If you are ill, you must take medicine. When the marshal wouldn't eat medicine when he was young, I also fed him like this. Tang Wan raised his head and looked sympathetically at Zhong He. This old man was very experienced, you must have suffered a lot when you were a child. Zhong He's expression froze at Lin Bo's words, recalling many scenes that he didn't want to remember. His gaze was somewhat cold. Tang Wan felt that he had guessed correctly and his heart was suddenly balanced. The marshal had also been forced to drink it, how unexpectedly refreshing. Tang Wan laid down and stroked the cat's head for a while. His heart was comfortable, and was thinking that one step would be one step. Anyway, nothing could be solved now, incomparable to Buddha. How did that phrase come to be? It wasn't easy to live, yet being alive was something to be treasured. Lin Bo closed the door for them and muttered in a voice that could be heard by others. Modern young people, sleeping together without knowing how to close the door. Tang Wan stiffened. He looked at his current posture. After a few seconds of silence, he tucked his head against the big cat and pretended to be dead asleep. Because Tang Wan had suddenly fainted during the live broadcast, Weibo had become a mess. The fans were nervous. Tang Wan had declined before, saying that he was in good health, not willing to call in a professional. Now that so many people had seen him faint, they all believed it. The fans were discussing on his Weibo. What's the situation? How could you say that fainting was just fainting? Heavens! Just what was going wrong? Was there anyone who could come out and say something about how Tang Wan was? I heard that many powerful abilities are from overdrawing from the life force. This power can be called Heaven's curse. Tang Wan's ability is to summon Earth's Meng pets, long-lost life that had already vanished. Does his ability fall into this category? Heavens! I'm so worried, why not find an agent? Stingy Tang. How much would it cost to find an agent? If he doesn't personally appear, then we wouldn't know anything at all. Worried that he died. What I care about is who rushed to hold him wearing the military uniform. He wears whatever he likes to wear, I just want to know how he's doing. Is it Marshal Zhong He? The image is too blurry to see clearly. Tang Tang's identity is too mysterious, a military officer's relative. Nonsense, if he had no backing, could the studio have been unblocked so quickly? The day it was reported was the day they went over the home to investigate. It couldn't be that he really lives in the marshal's mansion. I wondered if he's the companion that Marshal Zhong He always guards. The media hadn't managed to photograph his face before. Does it matter? Does it matter? He's sick, does his identity matter? What's important is that the more powerful his family is, the more likely he won't broadcast, then we can't see the furry little brats anymore. The discussion lasted until the fourth morning, when Tang Wan's fever had completely abated and he remembered that he hadn't given an explanation to his fans. He quickly sent a message on his Weibo, eating, sleeping, and scolding De Zhuang. Nothing happened, you don't have to worry about it. I couldn't broadcast until recently. I'll give you short videos of the fur children sometime. The fans were moved by his dedication and willingness to send videos to his fans even at this time. They advised him. No need to send them, rest well. Hurry and recover. Wait until you're well to broadcast. What life is this? Spiritual strength rose again. How high is your spiritual strength? Has it been tested yet? Did your ability overdraw your life force? It's so, it's better to use it less. Your life is most important. At this time, there was a person who poked Tang Wan. Rest well, you don't have to try to be brave if you don't feel well. Tang Wan raised his eyebrows in surprise. This was a non-corporate account that had been officially certified. Its identity had been kept secret and no one knew who it was. He again, IDDD. Just 2 letters, nothing else. Tang Wan stared at it for a while, and inexplicably sent back a sentence. I will pay attention to it, many thanks. At the other end of the network, the fingertips trembled and their gaze was fixed on Tang Wan's response. The black eyes grew deeper, just like the abyss of the night. Who's this mysterious person at the end? A stalker. Sigma, winky face. Also, announcement. Short version. We are pleased to announce that our Discord server has finally reached 1,000 plus members. To celebrate reaching 1,000 Discord members, we've decided to host a competition, giving away 1 month of Nitro subscription as a prize. The competition is fanart based and submissions can be inspired by any of CG's current, completed or teaser projects. If you're daring, you can even combine characters from several stories and or play with the plot as you wish. We'll be selecting a winner through a voting system via the website after the submission deadline to make everything fair and reader-focused. The deadline for submission is September 30th, 2019. Submissions must be sent in via this form. Voting will begin October 2nd, 2019 and end October 15th, 2019. The winner will be announced on October 16th and their artwork will be showcased on the website. We might even showcase the top 3. Please feel free to contact a mod, baby system, or host if you have any questions about the event. We've also set up a channel for discussions. #1000.fanart.contest, in our Discord. For the full announcement, please look at the hashtag announcement channel. Chapter 30. Behaving like a rogue. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Callous Editor. Walker Tang Wan didn't think much after the reply, just taking it to be a rich and powerful fan's inquiries. After exiting Weibo, he just wanted to get out of bed. Zhong He, who had just finished showering, quickly came over and pushed Tang Wan back down. Be good and lie down, you haven't recovered yet. Tang Wan was speechless, but I need to use the restroom. Only then did Zhong He let him go. He thought for a moment and then quickly added, come back quickly. Tang Wan sat up and said helplessly, I just awakened an unusual ability and my spiritual strength is unstable. I'm not crippled, what are you so worried for? Zhong He's expression showed that he was very worried. The corners of Tang Wan's lips hooked up, and he couldn't help but smile. Actually, he only needed to take medicine every day. Reportedly, this type of awakening, treatment wouldn't typically be required. They would be able to support themselves. The medicine he took were to stabilize his spiritual strength and clear out the residual poisons. The military doctor already said that he was alright. Zhong He wasn't assured and had been watching over him all this time, treating him as a seriously ill patient and not letting him get up from the bed even though he was fine. After going to the restroom and showering, but before Tang Wan had the time to change into his clothes, Lin Bo came to the door with a smile and knocked. When Tang Wan saw what he held in his hand, he just wanted to cry. Lin Bo placed the medicine on the table. Do you want to take it yourself, or should I feed it to you? Tang was resigned to his fate. I can take it myself. Oh, Zhong He's spiritual strength is also unstable. Why doesn't he need to take medicine? Lin Bo laughed and explained, the marshal's condition is more serious. He needs to go to the treatment room. Tang Wan sighed, took the medicine, and looked at Zhong He. Then you should cooperate with the treatment and recover earlier. Then you'll see how painful it is to take the medicine. Tang Wan furrowed his eyebrows and gulped down the medicine. Then he looked at Zhong He, who had been watching him attentively. Tang Wan was in a bad mood, I really can't swallow any more. I didn't secretly throw it away, why are you looking at me with those watchful eyes for? The corners of Zhong He's lips twitched, and, in a good mood, said. Seeing you look ugly. Tang Wan's lips thinned, his tongue merciless, you're ugly, out of your whole family, you're the ugliest. Zhong He was silent, and the atmosphere was awkward. Early in the morning, the couple said to the other that they were ugly, yet no one else could do it. Lin Bo ai.yid and said especially kindly to Tang Wan. He just wants to say that you look good. He just wanted to look until he can't free himself and doesn't want to pull away. Saying this, Lin Bo sighed and said with a weary heart. Do you understand the king of beasts' aloofness? Zhong He hummed, turned his head, and left, embarrassed. He couldn't bear to hear any more, but didn't want to block it either. Tang Wan chuckled and smiled. Other families' cats are cute when they're proud and charming. This marshal, he saw Zhong He standing behind the door and shook his head in a disdaining way. What aloofness! It would just be going through hell for the sake of face, not the least bit cute. However, this big cat's fighting strength was frightening, and with a temper fiercer than a kitten somehow made him feel secure. Perhaps only he could handle Zhong He, showing his softer side every time, and Zhong He didn't plot back against him at all, taking him at his word. Thinking of this, Tang Wan's heart felt warm and unexpectedly a little sweet. Tang Wan noticed that the other was tensed and couldn't help but tease him. He's also very good looking, otherwise I would have divorced him. Zhong He angrily turned his head. He still dared to mention divorce. Tang Wan laughed and said, I'm just teasing, it's not easy to find such a good cat. Whoever would leave would be a fool. Only then did Zhong He's face soften. As long as he knew, it was fine. After half a month's rest, Tang Wan was resurrected, full of blood. First, he wanted to see his own power. Once he was reborn, he had his own unusual ability, like a super scion. The military doctor had said that he had a healing ability and that this type of ability was very rare. Most became doctors. As he had been an ability-less person, he didn't know how to use it. He had to let himself slowly probe around. Tang Wan wandered around in the garden in the morning, looking for creatures he could experiment on with his healing ability. He felt that he could even cure a crippled leg. In the trees, a pair of half-grown leopards lay basking in the sun, leisurely wagging their tails and watching Tang Wan wander around. The pair looked at each other and leapt down from the tree. In a few leaps, they were in front of Tang Wan, startling him so much that he jumped back. Fuck. Leopards. One of the leopards happily asked. Furen, guess who I am? Tang Wan blinked and reacted. These two were beastmen. He cocked his head and looked them up and down. The left one's gaze was gentle, calm, and collected. The right's gaze was spirited, playfully wagging his tail. Tang Wan laughed and tentatively reached out, putting one hand on each head, gently rubbing. You are Jinan, and you are Jinza. Jinza pawed at his brother, the two instantly tussling into a ball. After punching and kicking at each other, they quickly separated, each standing on Tang Wan's left and right side. The two brothers had the same expression and even the same movements. The one on the left calmly asked. You guess again. Who is Qi Jinan and who is Qi Jinza? Tang Wan couldn't help but laugh. Whoever asked is Qi Jinza. Qi Jinza jumped excitedly a few times and circled around Tang Wan in admiration. You're the first one to get it right on the first try. Tang Wan smiled lightly and rubbed their heads, good-naturedly saying. That's because you two have different personalities. Qi Jinan brushed his brother aside with his tail, not letting him talk excessively. He politely asked Tang Wan. Are you looking for something? Do you need any help? I'm looking for an injured bug or something to see if my healing ability works. The older leopard brother was stunned by Tang Wan's mentality. He really was worthy of being the marshal's Furen. His way of thinking was different from normal people's. The younger leopard brother didn't think like his older brother, already helping Tang Wan dig holes. You just want to find an injured bug. Let me help you find it. While the older brother looked calmly from the side, neither speaking nor helping, watching his brother's four paws. His front paws were digging through the earth and his rear paws were pushing out, the dust flying around. In the blink of an eye, a pit had been dug, but unfortunately, except for a few grass roots and rocks, nothing was scraped out. Qi Jinan gagged in disgust and gracefully swished out. Soon after, Tang Wan saw a reluctant Zhong He being pulled over by a leopard with a corner of his coat in his mouth. Seeing that Tang Wan was in the garden, Zhong He raised his eyebrows, not needing Qi Jinan to drag him over anymore, walking over himself. Looking at the half-meter wide pits surrounding Tang Wan and Qi Jinza, Zhong He examined them, eyes full of interest. He suddenly raised his foot and kicked the little leopards but into one of the pits, like he was kicking trash. The leopard was buried underneath a bit of earth. Tang Wan burst out laughing, his heart really was black. Qi Jinza climbed up from the pit with a dull face and wiped his mouth with his paws. There was dirt on his face. Zhong He avoided it and pulled Tang Wan out of the way, dirty. The leopard shook off the dirt and glared at his brother, who kicked me. Qi Jinan was too lazy to pay attention to him. He also stepped back for fear of the flying dust dirtying his clean and smooth fur. Qi Jinza looked at this and looked at that, his eyes still gravitating towards his brother, suspecting it of being his brother's work. Tang Wan only wanted to say, "Save the children, this IQ can only transplant rice seedlings." It was only later that Tang Wan learned that Qi Jinza wasn't as absent-minded as he seemed on the surface. This child had many schemes in his heart, he was just disinclined to cause trouble at him, laughing carefree every day. He was as lively as a little monkey. In fact, Zhong He had always wanted him to enter the army's spy vanguard force after he graduated. The boy was driven, was full of courage and insight, and tenacious like a dagger. And Qi Jinan was fit to be a commander. He was steady and had the big picture. Zhong He wanted him to be the assistant to the Chief of Staff of the Imperial Army Headquarters after graduating from the military academy, that is, his right-hand man Gu Yenkai's assistant. These two children who had grown up beside him were orphans that had been left behind by an old comrade, and he raised his children as if they were his own nephews. At the moment, Qi Jinan didn't want to fight his younger brother because he was afraid that the other would rub the dirt all over himself. He went to find a perfect shelter for himself. Standing behind Tang Wan, he explained why he had brought Zhong He in. If you want to use your ability, you don't need to find anyone else. The marshal is already wounded. Injured spiritual strength can be healed as well. Tang Wan looked at Zhong He, surprised. It would be fine to find and take turns with a person who can heal you. Then Tang Wan noticed the big cat's gaze, as if saying, "With your IQ, you can't transplant rice seedlings." Tang Wan covered his chest, his heart stuffed. The future's people understood a lot, this old resurrected antique couldn't afford to offend them. Qi Jinan explained. The healing ability is an ability that stimulates human potential and promote healing. It can't be treated all at once, otherwise the patient won't be able to endure it. Each day, at most, it can only be 2. Before Qi Jinan could utter "hours," Zhong He suddenly reached out and smacked the leopard's head, just like a big cat smacking a small cat, causing a bang sound. "Go and play at the side, don't cause trouble while the adults are talking." The little leopard went away with a face full of grievance. Even Qi Jinza sympathized with his brother. "What did you say that you weren't supposed to say?" Qi Jinan said profoundly. "The marshal's heart is a needle at the bottom of the sea. Perhaps this is a man, the adult's world is really complex. Especially married men." Zhong He's ears twitched, and with a turn of his head, the two ridiculing brothers instantly felt the danger and simultaneously grew legs and rushed away madly. In the blink of an eye, they were gone. Zhong He turned to Tang Wan and asked, "Do you want to use your ability to heal the pits back to their original state?" Tang Wan rolled his eyes and asked angrily. "Do you think that I'm a fool? I have nothing to do, so I dig pits." Zhong He raised his eyebrows and asked, unruffled. "Then what are you digging pits for?" "I just don't know how to use it, and only wanted to catch a crippled insect so I can treat it." Before Tang Wan's words were finished, Zhong He's expression had changed. Tang Wan immediately reacted. There was some ambiguity in his words. It seemed that Zhong He had come to replace the insects. Tang Wan quickly corrected, "Of course, the insects aren't as ferocious as you." After that, Tang Wan couldn't help but cover his face, happy. I'm sorry, my mouth is loose. Zhong He watched his laugh, different from the past, as if he wasn't as distant. Zhong He's mood lifted and he was reluctant to be serious with Tang Wan. He generously forgave him and was perfectly happy to serve as Tang Wan's guinea pig. Feel around a bit, there's a portion of spiritual strength in your mind. If it comes out, it's good. Healing abilities won't cause harm. Try it on me. Tang Wan was confused. What strength? You're talking too abstractly. Zhong He tisked. It took effort to explain. Normally, when a person feels it, they can use it. How would I know what form it takes? Tang Wan's heart was crushed. Sorry, he had disgraced Earth's people again. Zhong He lifted up his hand and suddenly, a black mass appeared in his palm. He said solemnly, like this. It comes out with a wave. Tang Wan was shocked, his nerves quickly stretched. This thing was small, but the distortion in the atmosphere was visible to the naked eye. What is this thing? Zhong He held the black ball in his hand out to Tang Wan, patiently explaining, it has the power to swallow anything, like a black hole. Tang Wan nervously took a step backward, fearing that he would be touched, but unexpectedly, there was an excavated pit right behind him. It didn't matter that he was going backward, Tang Wan's body was weightless and he fell back entirely. There was only one thought in his mind. I'm finished. If he didn't break a bone, then he'd tear a muscle. He hadn't found a crippled insect, and yet he became crippled himself. Zhong He had sharp eyes and agile hands, grabbing him and tightly pulling him into his arms. He bowed his head and grumpily asked Tang Wan, who had still yet to react. How could you be so foolish? It's just a small pit, 10 meters is just a matter of using the strength in your legs. Tang Wan was stunned, but then struggled to return to his mind and his heart was beating hard again. I'm sorry, I'm too much of a cripple. I can't use my legs to jump across a distance of 10 meters. Tang Wan huffed and pushed the person who was clinging to him away, his heart out of sorts. It was a pity that Tang Wan couldn't push him anywhere. Zhong He's face softened. Fine then, this also lets me have a deeper understanding of you, cripple. Tang was frustrated and pressed his lips together. Met with such avoidance, his heart was especially unhappy. At this time, Zhong He shouted at the soldiers nearby, in the future, pits aren't allowed here, inspect the entire area, fill them in. In the garden where it is necessary to have pits, put up a fence. Tang Wan was surprised for a while, then suddenly understood why Zhong He had suddenly used such a voice. This big cat was afraid that he wouldn't be honestly expressing himself. After Tang Wan thought and understood it, he laughed, no need to go so far, I'm not such a cripple. After such a long time, with a person so sincere to him, even if his heart was a stone, it would be warmed up, let alone Tang Wan, who had been so deprived of affection. Suddenly, he had an idea in his mind. He wanted to see Zhong He quickly recover and see him in a military uniform, invincible and ever victorious. At this time, Tang Wan's palms contained a swirling white light. With his thoughts, it became brighter and brighter. Tang Wan looked at his fingertips, eyes bright, I seem to know how to use it. Oh. Zhong He narrowed his eyes and said with a serious face. That's very good, I haven't gotten any treatment today. The doctor doesn't have to come today. Tang Wan stared at him with wide eyes. You mean? Tang Wan pointed at his own nose, only wanting to ask if he was serious. A king depending on this little bronze level soldier for treatment. You're sure there would be results? Zhong He solemnly said, I'm depending on you. In the distance, the twins were lounging in the trees, looking at the two people who had been huddled together without letting the other go. The younger brother asked, puzzled, brother, what are they talking about? The marshal's expression is so serious. Lin Bo passed by slowly and without raising his head, said, behaving like a rogue, a deadpan, serious rogue, the type best at leaving people's hearts defenseless. The leopard brothers are so cute. And Tang 1 activating his ability with the power of love, asterisk greater than over equal to less than over equal to. Please look at this wonderful piece of fan art of Tang 1 and De Zhuang from It Neverless.